Thank you all very much. We have 5 hearings, so, and plus witnesses, so we want to accommodate everyone, so. I know that guy. Hey. All right, good afternoon. We're going to get started. First up is Chesapeake Bay overview. Madam Secretary and Mr. Secretary, you all can come on up as our analyst leads us into our process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll now present the Chesapeake Bay overview fiscal 2026 analysis. This is a non-budgeted analysis. I'm going to say that up front. So Chesapeake Bay restoration, kind of 3 main components. There's the total maximum daily load is sort of the weight we want to get to. There's the watershed implementation plans are sort of our diet to get there. And then there's the 2-year milestones. It's the checkup to make sure that we're on track to get where we want to go. So we're reaching the 2025 deadlines, coming up very quickly. And it's looking difficult for the states as a whole and for Maryland to meet that goal. However, there is talk about moving forward after the 2025 deadline, which we'll discuss a little bit in this analysis. On page 11, Exhibit 2 shows you kind of the big picture look. This is a little bit older data, but it kind of gives you a feeling for where the nitrogen loading is occurring in the bay. And that's the primary concern at this point. And that's on the far left of that map. You see the kind of green areas. Those are kind of the high nitrogen loading from the agriculture sector. And you've got the middle graph there shows the progress so far. And then the loading reductions that need to be made in addition to what we've done so far on the far right. And you see a lot of the agriculture on the eastern shore with the agriculture also up in Lancaster County area and down to the Shenandoah River Valley. A lot of the work needs to be done there and in some of the urban areas certainly too with stormwater and wastewater treatment plants. On page 12, Exhibit 3 shows you kind of some new targeting information that's been provided by Chesapeake Bay Program's Chesapeake Assessment and Scenario Tool. So this is the idea of the combination of where are the loads going to get to the bay and where are they the highest, the combination of the two. That means you should, in theory, you should focus your resources at these purple areas. And that would be for agricultural nitrogen. And then on the next page, Exhibit 4 reflects the urban nitrogen, where you would want to kind of focus your resources in terms of reducing nitrogen in that sector. On page 16, Exhibit 6 reflects the Maryland nitrogen pollution loads by sector. And very interesting switch here. Last year, there was a lot of concern about wastewater treatment plants in terms of where they were. And this was obviously the Back River and Patapsco wastewater treatment plants were having difficulties, and that meant there was a lot more loading of nitrogen. It meant that we were kind of going backwards in terms of our goals. However, those situations have been resolved, and now we're showing that agriculture really is where the most work needs to be done going forward. Then moving now to page 18, Exhibit 7 reflects the nitrogen pollution loads by basin. And once again, interesting situation. The Eastern Shore has the highest loads remaining, with percentage loads that need to be reduced, and that's largely agriculture. Last year, it was the Western Shore that showed the highest loads, and that was because the Western Shore had the wastewater treatment plants. So it's kind of this urban agricultural kind of sector divide between the Western and Eastern Shores. And then on page 20, Exhibit 8 shows how the big picture looks for all of the states. And District of Columbia has already met its goals. And although Delaware looks like it has a lot to do in terms of percentage, it's really Pennsylvania where most of the work needs to be done going forward. Moving now to page 24 is the first issue. This is the Chesapeake Bay Restoration Funding. This is kind of the big picture look. And on the next page, page 25, you can actually see the funding change between fiscal 2025 and fiscal 2026. So this is across all of the different agencies and universities that have any funding that relates to Chesapeake Bay Restoration. At least 50% of their program funding in whatever program is related to Chesapeake Bay Restoration. And this reflects also education. It reflects nutrient and sediment reductions and toxics and all sorts of things, land conservation. So it's not just the nutrient and sediment reductions that everybody's been focusing on. So this is a big, big, big picture. And what you're seeing is around an $83 million change between the 2 years, between fiscal 2025 and fiscal 26. And this is largely due to the purple line activities, a reduction of around $80 million for that purpose. And that is included as part of the funding that we're reflecting here. Moving now to the next page, page 28, excuse me. That's reflecting information about the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bay's 2010 Trust Fund. So this is one of the major components of funding for bay restoration. A lot of very important activities in terms of the funding being provided for. At the bottom of the page 28, you see one of the larger activities of the competitive grant program, and it's very basically no change between the 2 years in the funding. However, the next page, page 29, you can see that there's an increase of funding for the whole watershed funds. This is part of the Whole Watershed Act. So this money is one of the allowed sources of funding for that purpose. So $5 million being allocated to it. And you're also seeing an $8 million increase in cost containment actions that the kind of Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic Coastal Bay's 2010 Trust Fund is bearing. This is obviously due to the fiscal condition of the state, the idea that they do have a balance. There's an opportunity there to defray general funds. So funding is being used for that purpose. It won't work long-term, of course, because there's only around $12.2 million in the balance. So going forward, there needs to be a change in terms of how we look at these things. Hopefully, we'll kind of get out of our fiscal situation and won't need to use this funding further. The bottom of page 29 is a recommendation to comment on the long-term plan for the 2010 Trust Fund in terms of that concern about the use for cost containment, and also recommending the adoption of narrative, and that's going to show up in the Department of Natural Resources analysis. Issue 2, Whole Watershed Act implementation, starts on page 30. So Whole Watershed Act passed in the last session. Administration is picking 5 different watersheds and kind of 1 project per watershed. The idea is really to do a lot of hand-holding, because permitting for environmental projects is incredibly challenging. And it's one of the big hurdles and constraints to actually getting projects done. So the idea is the administration will make sure that it works directly with those 5 partners to make sure over a 5-year period they can get to the goals that they want to get to. Obviously, very important to make sure that the permitting occurs, because obviously permitting can obviously stall or completely cancel a project. The funding is coming from the 2010 Trust Fund and the Bay Restoration Fund in fiscal 2026. And it also, based on the agency's testimony, it looks like some of the Waterway Improvement Fund as well is being used for that purpose. The bottom of page 31, DLS recommends administration comment on the outcome of the fall 2024 RFP, a request for proposals that closed December 3rd, 2024, on which projects were chosen, and to generally talk about kind of what the implementation strategy is going to be for the Whole Watershed Act projects process. DLS also recommends that DNR, in cooperation with the other BayStat agencies, submit a report with the fiscal 2027 allowance, basically describing what the Whole Watershed Act's funding is and how the projects are going, the ones that have been funded already, because you provide funding in year 1, and then the funding will be used over 5 years. We obviously want to kind of keep track of how it's being used year after year. On page 32, the third issue concerns historical and projected Chesapeake Bay restoration spending. This is an annual report requested by the legislature, or the Budget Committee, excuse me. A number of things to note here in terms of kind of what the administration is focusing on. One of the issues is moving away from nutrient and sediment reduction. So this is kind of not looking so much at kind of the deep part of the bay and how much oxygen is there. That's been the focus of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, or total maximum daily load. The idea is really move to more of a shallow water habitat restoration kind of employment. And then also look at soil health and equity issues, and then also climate resiliency as well. So kind of really expanding the scope in a sense, but not focusing so much on the deep part of the bay. Obviously, mitigation of loads from growth is an ongoing concern. The increasing difficulty, obviously, climate change is one of the increasing difficulty components. In terms of more rainfall, means more nutrients coming down into the bay. Water quality monitoring data looks good in some areas, but then not great in some others. Water temperature is really not looking very good at all, which is obviously not good for some of the aquatic life, and we're moving more to like kind of the restoration for habitat, and that's going to be a challenge for some of those species. On the next page, discuss a little bit more here. I focus really on the oyster water quality credits. So the oyster filtration of bay water is now recognized as a water quality improvement practice. So that'll obviously help to support the aquaculture industry, because they'll now be getting credits for the work that they're doing, and they'll also have the business opportunities there as well. And there's also a part of that funding, or that kind of a improved practice, relates to the repletion of oysters on reefs that are used for, I guess, for the commercial watermen. And perhaps the administration can talk a little bit more about how that works exactly in terms of the water quality credit component. On the next page, page 34, DLS recommends that a narrative be adopted asking for that report once again. And that'll come up in the Department of Natural Resources analysis. Also on page 34, this is a review of a critical path forward for the Chesapeake Bay program beyond 2025. So we're rounding the bend on the 2025 deadline. What are we doing next? So the Principal Staffs Committee was asked to provide some information about really what are the next steps? Where should we go looking forward, and kind of advising the decision makers on what are the next steps. The ideas were kind of really to focus on the science, make sure you're looking at the science and kind of addressing changes that need to occur in management actions as the science changes. Focus on restoration and conservation. It's not just about what's happening in the bay, it's also what's happening in the watershed as well. Land conservation is obviously an important part of that. And focusing on the partnership aspect. Everybody wants to kind of come together on this. We need to come together to be able to kind of solve our problem. We can't do this as individual states. And then in terms of the actions that were adopted by the Chesapeake Executive Council, they've now asked the Principal Staff Committee to go back and look at the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement outcomes to see if any of the outcomes need to be revised. Particularly, one of them would be the deep bay kind of nutrient and sediment load requirements, but others as well. And then also to look at how to simplify and streamline the partnership process. As obviously, as bureaucracies grow, they become a little bit unwieldy, and the idea was to kind of go back and look and see how things were going, see what's the most effective way to kind of get things done. DLS recommends the administration comment on how the budget reflects these kind of changes in policy. Then on page 36, the Conowingo Dam. So a couple components here. First, the Conowingo Dam Watershed Implementation Plan. So around 6.7 million pounds of nitrogen need to be reduced per year. This is on top of the work that's already being done for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. $25 million was allocated by the administration a couple years ago. Exhibit 12 on pages 38 and 39 reflects the first outcomes in terms of projects that have been awarded by the Susquehanna Bay River Commission, which is the fiscal authority that's actually using this funding to go for a pay-for-success model. So they do an RFP, people then submit proposals for what projects they think they can do most efficiently, and then there's a selection criteria process, and they go through and select the projects. I find very interesting on the bottom of page 38 the Rose Tree Consulting Project, because I think there's perhaps the first time to see nitrogen cost per pound is $6 per pound, which is incredible. And I mean, it sounds like they've got Miracle Grow or something like that, that they're going to be able to provide farmers. It's going to keep the nitrogen right on the fields and then can provide for profitability. I'm very curious about how that plays out, because it's an impressive sounding project, and we need those. In terms of the relicensing, that starts on page 40. So the dam is being relicensed. There was a process in which the Maryland kind of looked at certain requirements, then backed off of them, and then it was determined that what Maryland had agreed to was not really authorized, and therefore there's a relicensing process going on right now. One thing to highlight here on the bottom of page 40, this has been a concern for a couple of years, is the idea of how long is the water quality certification process allowed to go. So if you're an entity like a dam and you want to be relicensed, an energy company for its hydropower dam, you really want to get that done expeditiously. So when you submit an application, you would like it to be done within a couple of years. Well, it's been now, 7 years since the kind of original kind of process, or even longer, I think, since then. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission recently published a rule in November 21, 2024, saying that it really should take 1 year for this process to occur. So is this a concern for the state? We've obviously been going a lot longer than that. So that's one of the questions we're going to ask on the next page, on page 41, in that excessively large paragraph. And DLS basically recommends that the agency comment on the $25 million allocation, the remaining money that will be used for the Conowingo Dam Watershed Implementation Plan, and talk about kind of what is known about the RFP process and kind of what they're going to go for that next funding stream for the Susquehanna River Basin Commission's Pay for Success model. and also to talk about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's recent ruling and how that might impact the agreement we have with Constellation Energy for $200 million over 50 years for a lot of water quality improvement practices in the Conowingo Dam watershed, the Susquehanna Bay River watershed. On page 40, issue number 6 concerns the, an omnibus piece of legislation. This is Administration Bill, Senate Bill 428 and HB House Bill 506, the Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act. There's a number of provisions. I'll just highlight the first one here. It's the new Maryland Leadership and Environmentally Engaged Farming Program, or LEAF. So talked a little bit earlier about agriculture is really what we need to be doing going forward. I mean, obviously, you need to maintain the wastewater treatment plants and make sure that they're still efficient. We have to work on urban stormwater practices, very expensive. Agriculture really needs the help in terms of there are few sticks, and that's kind of the way policy is. There are very few sticks to actually kind of make things happen in the agriculture industry. So therefore, the administration is looking at an incentive program. The idea being, let's go out and find the farmers who are doing all the right things, who are doing the nutrient management practices we want, that are engaging with the environmental community and the agricultural community, the community best practices, and really putting them forward. Obviously saying that they're doing the right thing, and then perhaps giving them certain benefits in terms of perhaps preferential treatment for certain agricultural programs, such as Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program, and maybe assistance as well. So very interesting program. Just note, though, on the bottom of page 43, DLS would like the administration to talk a little bit more about kind of how those preferences would occur, how the kind of tiers that they're talking about, in terms of kind of lowest tier, you're doing some things, but not everything. Why don't you do the highest tier? You're kind of the gold standard, sort of like the leadership in energy and environmental design for buildings type of idea, but for agriculture. So we'd have the agency talk a little bit about that. And there seems to be a conflict between the funding that's being proposed for the program of $900,000 going forward and a couple of actions that are occurring in legislation that would actually reduce the amount of funding that seems to be available for that purpose. So $2.5 million is there for tree planting. The Maryland Department of Agriculture can't use all of that funding. The idea is in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, reduce $2 million that the government has to provide every year. That means there's $500,000 left. The way I read the bills, that meant that there's $500,000 that would be left for both tree planting and for the new LEAF program. That doesn't seem like enough, obviously, if they're budgeting $900,000 in fiscal 2026. DLS recommends the agency's comment on that. And then on the final page there, page 44, DLS notes that this is a non-budget agency. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to dare to ask any of our members if you have any questions for Andrew. It's a good thing we have a public safety committee. We deal with fire hoses. Sometimes we get it all. So I appreciate that very thorough overview for the Chesapeake Bay today. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. So we have with us before us three secretaries, Secretary McElwain, Secretary Kurtz, and Secretary Addix. You all can proceed in whichever order you deem fit. I think if you pay particular attention, whomever is assigned to page 38, when Andrew mentioned about the Rose Tree program. Rose Tree Consulting. If you could actually add those to your comments as well, I'd be interested as well. So please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Josh Kurtz, Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for having us today to discuss the Chesapeake Bay budget. As Mr. Gray touched on, we're at an inflection point right now with the broader partnership. And one of the ways that we've really been able to drive success across the Bay, and I think really important for us in Maryland, is it's not just our actions that matter here. We need that similar type of support, both budgetarily and programmatically, in Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, Delaware, New York. I mean, a lot of different partners. And I think what you see reflected right now is the strength of the agreement that we've been with under that is expiring here in 2025. And what we have been looking at in Maryland, 31 outcomes, 18 of them have been met. We are very close on several of the other ones. A couple we're a little further away on. And so we've been doing that deep level of analysis. But the key here in terms of the Bay restoration in Maryland and regionally is partnership, which was touched on by Mr. Gray. And the way that we have been working internally in Maryland Maryland. The governor created the Watershed Council, really unifying all of our agencies that touch on bay restoration, whether that be through how we develop, whether that be through how we're implementing transportation projects, which was touched on here, agriculture, how we're permitting, et cetera. So a wide range of agencies touch on our success here. And when we look at how we've been able to make this success, we have the highest grade in the past 20 years. Our monitoring program is showing significant improvements in a multitude of areas. As Mr. Gray touched on, there are some areas that are lagging behind, but that's why we're starting to really laser focus in on that. And when we look at what's made us successful, and we're now starting to see in other states, is our budget. It is consistent, dedicated funding to our agricultural community, to our wastewater treatment facilities, and to restoration broadly across the state of Maryland. We've seen one of the biggest jumps forward in Pennsylvania over the past 5 years. Well, what did they do? They recreated our agricultural cost share program. This year, we had the highest rate of agricultural cost share in the region in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland combined. Right? These are really exciting things that are happening, and really we are seeing that progress. So we've established a lot of what we've seen be successful across the region, and now what we're recognizing is the areas where we need to kind of tweak that, where we need to up our outcomes. And so we're really focusing in on how we can be innovative. I'm going to touch on the specific question around the whole Watershed Act, but we are being innovative not only in how we implement these programs, but how we budget, and I think that's incredibly important. And we are basing all of this off the best available science. As Mr. Gray talked about, the comprehensive evaluation of system response was done by over 50 scientists in the watershed, really evaluated deeply all of the ways we've been working to improve water quality and bring people into the restoration effort. And a couple things that are really important to touch on. One is the idea that when we are building projects and putting incentives on the ground, we can't just focus on the projects. We have to focus on how those projects work with other projects. We get better outcomes when we have a farmer who has cover crops upstream from a small wastewater treatment plant, upstream from a living shoreline. And the science bears that out. So we're focused on that interconnection now, and those are programmatic shifts you've seen across all of our agencies. And then also focusing in on pay for success. As you heard, $6 for a pound of nitrogen is incredible. And by really tapping into the power of private industry through the Conservation Finance Act, the Clean Water Commerce Act, all of our agencies are really leaning into pay for performance and bringing the private sector into this and creating those private sector opportunities. As Mr. Gray touched on, the oyster restoration space is a very, very, I think, ripe market for us. You look at what Charles County is doing with their aquaculture program and WIP credits. Talbot County looking at ways for commercial watermen to get involved in this as well, bringing additional funding to create economic return, which builds water quality. I mean, these are the kind of wheels we need to build to spin that are going to result in a restored bay. And so we submitted responses to all of the questions, but two in particular I really wanted to touch on, and that is the question about whole watershed implementation on page 32. So we have created the state management team. We have received 9 projects. These projects are incredibly robust. They total over $205 million in potential investment paired with the state funds to be able to build water quality. And the great thing about them is they're all partnership driven. We have taken what we've learned at the regional level here in the state, and we're now applying these across the watersheds. We've allocated funding at MDE, at DNR, and at Department of Agriculture to be able to do that, as was discussed by Mr. Gray, as well as waterway improvement funds, which can actually help us do that monitoring to prove we're being successful. So those 9 projects are being reviewed right now, but they meet the statutory requirements as well as some of the additional regulations. And we believe that we're also going to see a much lower dollar per nitrogen across all of these programs that will be selected in March. The other one that I wanted to touch on too is just how we are incorporating in the budget what we are advocating for in terms of the next iteration of the Bay program. So we're in the Beyond 2025 process right now. What do we do next? And what you see in our budgets are not just the dollar figures, but how we spend the money. So at the Department of Natural Resources, we've reworked how we allocate funds to be much more outcome focused and less project focused. So before, someone would come to us and say, I want money to plant a tree, and then I want money over here to do a living shoreline, and we would make them go through multiple grant applications. Now what we're doing is saying, bring us holistic projects that demonstrate water quality improvement, and then we will do the work on the back end to align those funding streams in the trust fund, in the waterway improvement fund. And that's allowing us to move more quickly and to build more robust projects and partnerships. So those were the 2 questions that I just wanted to touch on briefly. Happy to answer more, and then I will turn it over to my colleague, Secretary McElwain.
Thank you.
And before you do that, I want to echo what you said. I'm hoping I'm going to hear it. I'm sure I'm going to hear it from the other two panelists about partnership. We want to add a component to that. That's us. That's us as we move forward, and including some of the folks that are in your audience as well. If you look at the makeup of our committee, you all three of you have dealt with us over the years. It's probably not a good term, dealt with, but I think as we move forward, I mean, we're at a promising position right now. We just need to keep the momentum going, as well as staying in touch and getting updates as quickly as we can get the updates. The more we can make adjustments. We're in the 90-day window, but the 9 months is where the work gets done. So you proceed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you, Chair, and
You as well.
all the committee members. Happy to be here. For the record, I am Serena McElwain, representing Maryland's Department of the Environment. I am the secretary, and I just want to give some brief remarks, just updates. I'll start by saying we are well aware, all of us, my colleagues, as well as the administration, the challenges that we have in funding going forward for this, in terms of state funding as well as federal funding. We're doing everything we can as agencies, as an administration, to address those issues. Some of them, as you know, just hearing so far from the Secretary as well as Mr. Gray, we have alternatives that we are considering to make sure that the Chesapeake Bay is not left behind. I'll put it that way. And when you mention the pay for performance program that we have, that's one of the ways that we're being strategic. We're utilizing private funds so that they can fund those projects up front, and then when they are actually realizing the benefits that they're saying they have, then we repay them. Which brings me, I'll stop my talking points for a second. I want to address the issue that you mentioned about Rose Tree Consulting and how it's kind of interesting that they are at $6 per pound. I will say that for that company in particular, we all know that nitrogen fertilizers it's a real problem with pollution, and this company is saying that they have technology that they've created that will essentially reduce the need for that type of fertilizer. And so again, that's why the pay for performance is important, because that's what they're saying. If they can do that, we're not funding it upfront. We will repay them for the cost if that is in fact the case.
Once they complete it, yes. Please keep us abreast.
Will do. And then I'll just quickly I really just want to talk a little bit about the accomplishments that we've made as an agency because of all the support and investment in the Chesapeake Bay regarding restoring the Chesapeake Bay. One of the things that we're doing, and my colleague here has mentioned it, we have the early warning system. And that system is so important in terms of ensuring that the wastewater treatment plants are continuing to operate where they are today. As we all know, there were a lot of problems with those wastewater treatment plants. I am happy to report today that they are doing much better. They're meeting their requirements. This early warning system is really important because we're able to see faster and quicker when there are issues with the systems. We have a partnership with them. We call them right away, and we make sure that they're getting back on track. And this is one of the reasons why the TMDL has improved because of in the wastewater treatment area. So again, I know I mentioned it a lot, but it's really important, that early warning system. The stormwater management regulations we have, they are outdated. They're not really appropriate for climate change today. And so we're updating our stormwater regulations. We really are trying to harmonize water quality and quantity, and that's why we're looking at the stormwater regulations and ensuring that they're meeting where we are today with climate change. The building industry is well aware of what we're doing. We've met with the building industry multiple times, and we're hoping to have these regulations updated within a year. The other area in which we are doing a lot and have really improved is in terms of inspections and compliance. We have more inspectors, we're doing more inspections, and we're making sure that we're holding the wastewater treatment plants and operators accountable for results. So we're doing a really, I think we're doing a really good job in that area as well. We did have a backlog when I started in terms of administratively continued permits. You all call them zombie permits. We've gotten those zombie permits down to 81% now. And so that is a big, huge improvement. We're trying to get to 100%. These administratively extended permits are not good. And so I took that very serious from the last time we met here. And the last point I'll make is regarding permits. We're updating permits as well, and how we do permits. We're making them faster and quicker. But more importantly, we're adding operations and maintenance in those permits, because again, when you have problems at the wastewater treatment plants, it is literally because of the operations and the maintenance. So we're making sure that we're really upfront and right at the core of operations and maintenance, and that's why we're including them in the permits.
Madam Secretary, you spoke about your stormwater management program and how well you're working with the development community. Speak very briefly to your relationship with MDOT. So, for example, in Prince George's, we have 15 metro stations, so we're hoping to get that other one, enhance the area around Greenbelt for the FBI building. But what's very important is that if you look at the land that those stations have been built on, and the growth, state of Maryland, we had last census roughly 100,000. I'm sorry, in Prince George, 100,000 people. But the state of Maryland, if you look at the growth that we have, it's vital for our roadways and to ensure that our these systems are managed properly. So if you could speak to that, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we work very closely with MDOT. You have the MS4 permits. Again, we're updating the stormwater regulations. We work very closely. We're monitoring all that's going on with all the counties, including Prince George's County. I do understand all the growth that's happening in Prince George's County. But again, I meet with the Secretary of MDOT monthly, and we go over all of those projects.
And we are also unique in Prince George's and Montgomery counties with the WSFC, with the bi-county. And so I participate or worked with you all last session on a particular piece of legislation where permitting became, it was a consternation point. I'm not sure how real that was, but I certainly would like to, I think it was a meaningful piece of legislation that dealt with the permitting component of it. You spoke to operation and maintenance. I guess the reporting out of the process for the permitting as you are moving forward. We want to make sure that as you all are moving in all three agencies, that we don't have these permitting issues. At least we understand what the process is, so we can speak to the local folks about it.
Okay, absolutely. I can make sure that happens. We follow up.
All right.
Thank you.
So you good?
That's it for me.
All right. I don't know if it's for me. Probably. Do you think we ought to break now, or should we go with Secretary Addicks? Go ahead. Let's try to finish it up.
I'll be very quick. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Gray, thank you very much. I did want to comment just on the nitrogen fixing and just the $6 per pound. We love innovations like that, and we've got a lot of farmers who are engaging with these alternative products. One of the challenges is we have no way to capture or celebrate or model that. The WIP model, everything we're doing for the Chesapeake Bay, that doesn't count. Those types of practices per se don't count. The results count, but the practices don't count. And it's that type of gap which is leading to the formation of our LEAF program, the Leaders in Environmentally Engaged Farming, is a program that's still in development. We've spent 2 years listening to the farming community, the environment and conservation community, our partners in the research community, and our policy members, both state and county. And what we have determined is that the tools that we currently have, while we do believe and we have evidence that they work, there is this system response, as Secretary Kurtz mentioned, where we'll know for sure, and we'll see all of the benefits of our last 20 years of these practices going in on farms. We'll know for sure over the next 20 years. That's great, but we need to do more things now, and that's what the Caesar report from the Bay program instructed us to do. And I'll give you a very quick overview on LEAF and then comment on the budget question. The idea with LEAF is that our department and our peer departments have many entry points for producers. They can come through our Ag Cost Share program, and that may be the only thing they ever learn about. They may come in through our Soil Conservation District and go for a USDA or EPA-funded program that is outside of what we do, and that's all they may ever know about. What LEAF does is it ties all of these programs together. They may come into one of our marketing programs to learn how to sell more of their products to the Department of Corrections or sell more of their products at farmers markets, but may never learn about our conservation programs. And so LEAF is an entire system transformation where no matter where a producer, a farmer touches any of our agencies, they will first and foremost learn about the LEAF program, become a part of the LEAF program, and once they're on that path, just like if you're building a green building, there's a menu of opportunities, practices that you can employ, and then the lead building code folks will come out and will assess your progress and assign you a score for how well you have done, how many practices you have built. In so doing that, if we instead of as Secretary Kurtz said, you want to plant trees, we give you a grant. You want to put in a buffer, we give you a grant. The LEAF concept allows us to scale the different practices by point value. So if you're putting in a buffer in Frederick County, that's very important. But it's extremely valuable to the environment and the ecosystem if you put a buffer in on your critical area, coastal land on the eastern shore. So it's not you get a buffer and you get a buffer. It's you both get buffers, but yours is worth 5 points, yours may be worth 15 points because we really, really, really need a buffer here. It also works as a vehicle to encourage engagement in conservation practices, but also conservation research. So there has been a concern over the years that it is ag versus the environment and vice versa. We all know that the path forward is together. And what we will be doing as part of this is, once you're in this program, there will be additional point values assigned if a farmer engages in research with an institution or with a nonprofit conservation partner. Points will be assigned to that behavior, that practice. So again, it's a culture change. It's a shift in how we think about conservation and promotion and buying local and all of the things. On the question about money, the original concept was we had an underutilized fund in the department, the Tree Solutions Now money, $2.5 million. And the thought was, in addition to trees, which is what that is for, and trees are obviously part of the LEAF program, to allow that money to also be used to administer the LEAF program. Part of the administration's agenda was to look, after that was set and was moving forward on a path, budgeting occurred, and it was determined that, okay, where there are underutilized funds, let's reallocate them. Let's find where those funds are, and let's put them to appropriate use. And so the LEAF language that's in the Bay Legacy Act goes on that original language of, for LEAF, you can use some of the Tree Solutions Now money. Then came the general fund budget, which shows a new allocation of $900,000 for use by LEAF. If both of these go forward, the net effect is we'll have $500,000 in the department for use for trees, and we'll have $900,000 for use for LEAF. So that is you know, and best laid plans, right? We have these two vehicles moving forward, the budget and then the Budget Reconciliation Act. So, and the Bay Legacy Act, which moves to determine where that Tree Solutions Now money goes forward. So we've got different things in motion, but the goal in the end, if all things move forward as planned, $500,000 to be used for trees as part of our conservation programs, and $900,000 to be used for the development of our LEAF program. So happy to take questions.
All right, before we go around, I want a couple of things I want to say. Secretary Kurtz, you spoke of the oyster restoration project and, you know, enhancing our aquaculture. You know, I get a lesson every time I go down to one of my counties. I represent 3 counties, right? Prince George, Charlotte, and Coward. And I have a business owner in Chesapeake Beach. Abner's Crab House has been in business probably 58 years doing crabbing. And the last couple of years, he has embarked upon oysters. And he is like super excited. You know, he talks more about that than he does his crabs. But he's super excited about that. And so talk about the growth of, first of all, the knowledge of it and the you know, the assistance that's out there for Marylanders and farmers and you know, watermen and whomever else. How widespread is that knowledge, particularly on the rewards for our watershed?
Yeah, and I think this is an area where we have the opportunity to really grow and expand rather rapidly. So if you look at our aquaculture business across the state, last year we did 94,000 bushels. It's the highest number that we've ever achieved. That is significantly below all the other states. And so we asked the question, what are some of the reasons that is not growing rapidly? One is regulatory. We've tightened up a lot of that. We actually, a part of the Bay Legacy Act addresses another couple of the issues for the growers. But the other piece is ensuring that it's profitable. And in the agriculture space, we're applying that same principle, right? We need our growers to be profitable so they continue to grow. And when they add oysters that were not going to be added to the water, what do? We get more nitrogen out of the water. We know that. So they're adding a benefit to the ecosystem by doing the thing that creates the money, or creates, the financial return. So they're able then to count that, or the county can pay them to credit towards their watershed implementation plans for them actually growing the oyster. So what we're really doing is we're finding that financial incentive to pair with the existing business model that gives them a little bit extra financial obligation or incentive, a little bit extra profit, so that their businesses can grow a little bit more rapidly. And when we look at the opportunities in the commercial space too, you know, the addition of more oysters into the bay is what we want to see. And so if they are investing in more oysters in the bay, then they're able to sell that financial benefit of the nitrogen reduction. And that's really, I think, at the base, what we're trying to do with pay for performance in a multitude of sectors, identify where there's that additional benefit that the state is getting, and then help that producer tap into that so they can create more profit for their business and grow more rapidly.
No, and I appreciate that. And last, I'll say one more thing about that I learned from Mr. Abner. You know, these oyster reefs help to serve as barriers for, you know, if you, along the Chesapeake Bay, we have erosion, and they actually help. I mean, who knew, right? But at the end of the day, I think the more we can spread that information in any way that we can work together to help ensure that our bay is getting the quality attention it needs, and as a matter of fact, you know, turning around quicker how clean it is as we move forward. And I appreciate you all's partnership. Lastly, I'll say to Mr. Addix, I know that we're going to have some conversations regarding the budget regarding SMATIC. I had the opportunity to serve on that board, Southern Maryland Agriculture and Development Corp. That is one of the programs that I've had an opportunity not only to see but participate in for 11 years now. The return on that investment of the projects that are aligned with that corporation is phenomenal. So things like that, through partnerships, we can kind of see if we can sustain them or find other ways. In addition to sustaining them, also find ways that we can lend the services to the other two agencies so we can protect that interest. So appreciate that. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the briefing. And I think the things that we continue to talk about throughout the years, I have a couple concerns, and so I want to thank Secretary for always being there when we would call, and some of the problems that we had for the quality of the water and the monitoring that we are constantly on. We have nonprofits in our area doing the same, and that's ongoing. And so I appreciate them doing that on their time. We've got literally homeowners going out and just checking out some of our areas, as you know, about our wastewater treatment plant. And how are we making sure, because our problem arose because of preventive maintenance. And we knew that was a major problem, but at the same time, we didn't have the quality workers and the qualified workers that could do the work. How are we making sure that we're on top of that, maintaining that, and we don't get back to where we were?
Yeah, there's always been a real challenge, and you're referring to the workforce and talent in that area.
Yes.
It's not a field where there's a lot of people waiting to have a job at a wastewater treatment plant. But right now, I would say that just based on the inspections that we're doing and the partnership that we have with them, we're monitoring what they're doing. They have sufficient staff today.
Good.
What is the plan to ensure that they have a workforce strategy to ensure that that continues? Honestly, I don't have that information right in front of me, but I can find out for you because I think it's important. We don't need anything to make us go backwards. And we're watching them, and we're watching everything that they're doing. And like I said, the early warning system is certainly a help, but that will not help us if someone leaves.
No.
So I'll make sure we look into that.
And I appreciate that, because working with the city of Baltimore and working with our community colleges, we have opportunity to, look into my good senator in front of me loves to, and I do the same trades or opportunities for young people. And I know it's a hard thing to get somebody to work at a wastewater treatment plant, but if we can try in some way to make it look enticing, it's good. I know it's hard. But I think it's an ongoing problem that we've had. And I know that's been a conversation with our city partners, is just trying to get the right people and making sure we maybe have a reserve in some way that we can work with that and work with you.
Yeah, I would just add that, we have to be creative, and we do have a lot of people who are looking for work in Maryland. We have prisoners coming out of the system who are smart, who are ready to be engaged and contribute to all that we're doing, including those types of jobs. And so I think that's an area that's worth looking into, maybe some kind of partnership and training program, even for those particular citizens who are looking for work.
I appreciate it. If I have one more, Mr. Chairman. I think one thing that we need to do as we look into this is one of our problems that we've had is preventive maintenance, but also the permits and the assessments that's ongoing of looking at the wastewater treatment plant and the accountability in that, because of making sure we're just on top of this. Have we always had, or do we have a plan now to always making sure that we're getting the information when they do have the assessments, when we do have the information of the upkeep, or some of the problems that we had that we can look into in our wastewater treatment plants?
We have a system because they're required to send us reports regularly.
And it'd be good if maybe if we had that information as well.
If you could share that with us.
So
we'd
that would
appreciate
be
it.
good to just know that.
Share what you can.
It would be a help to me
Okay.
and my constituents and others here, that if we have that information, it would be better for all of us. So
Okay,
thank
absolutely.
you. No, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Rosepel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
I want to go to the 30,000-foot level relevant to each of your departments. So what's going on with the federal government and you guys? I mean that seriously. So I've asked each agency head, and I'm just curious, what has happened so far? What are you concerned about in terms of the grant? thing and any other federal changes in the last 2 weeks?
We were hoping you had the answer.
I had the answer last November and
Okay.
I lost.
Well, do you want me to start? I'll say as far as I'm concerned, I think all of us, what's going on is a lot of chaos. So what we're trying to do is read through the chaos and figure out how all of these executive orders and demands and directives to the federal agencies are impacting us.
Right.
So we're doing a thorough analysis that we are, and we're working very closely with the administration to really look at how all of these potential changes will impact us. Some of them are potential, some of them are real. Right now, we can see it. So some of them we don't actually know. So we're gonna make sure that Maryland is okay. We're gonna make sure that we look internally at our own resources and to ensure that, again, we wanna make sure that none of our programs are left behind, and we're just going through it. It is a challenge.
Can you be a little more specific, though, in terms of, I mean, you had the executive order dealing with grants
Right.
that was rescinded. I've heard from other agencies that while the executive order was rescinded, their funding agencies have not changed their direction to the grantees.
Well, it's a little complicated. So the initial direction was rescind the grants and federal money. That put us all in chaos. It was rescinded back. However, what was rescinded was for certain programs. There were some unintended consequences for that directive, like Medicare services and social services. So they pulled it back, but also came back and said, well, while we're rescinding it and putting it back, some of the executive orders relating to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and climate, which is my area,
Right.
we haven't actually changed our mind on those. So we still are watching to see exactly which grants are being pulled back, because a lot of them have a lot to do with what we do at MDE.
So which agencies do most of your federal money coming from? EPA?
US EPA most for me.
Okay. And so the case of EPA,
Yep.
the communication you have from EPA now on your major grants is what?
Zero. They're not speaking right now.
In this, I'm sorry,
There's
go ahead.
not a lot of communication. There's a lot of chaos going on
No,
right
I understand the
now.
chaos, but I'm asking,
So that's what I'm saying. So.
have you gotten any communication from EPA in the last 2 weeks on grants that you get from them?
I have not heard from US EPA personally. No,
Well, I mean personally, I mean the agency.
that's what I mean. Personally, my agency. So sorry.
So there's
No.
been no communication from EPA to the Maryland Department of the Environment related to the federal grants, related to the executive order?
As far as I know.
Okay, all right.
As far as I know.
Okay.
There has not been any communication.
Okay.
We've reached out, but let me look back and make sure. I'll talk with all of my folks to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yeah, okay, no, I
And then
understand.
I'll get back with you.
If you would do that, because I mean, from what I've read and what I've heard from other people, they have gotten communications from the agencies. I mean, I'll
Oh,
give you an
that's
example.
interesting.
Well, no, I mean, I talked with the head of a major university last night who said that their funder had given them clear direction to not proceed with spending money under an existing grant. So that's why I'm asking everybody what's really going on. So if you could check on that, that'd be great.
I will do that.
Thank you. How about Josh?
Yeah, so we receive funds from a wide range of agencies, and what I would say is that it's not consistent across those agencies, whether we're hearing or not. I think it really kind of comes back to, at times, personal relationships. When we look at, how the department is funded, we have almost 100 positions that are federally funded in the agency. Those are the fund sources that we're tracking really closely. When you look at the Chesapeake Bay program, we know that, and that's a wide range of agencies: NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, EPA, right? Each one of those agencies is giving slightly different guidance, frankly. I think what we are seeing from like Fish and Wildlife Service and some of the agencies that have the basically the user pay, user benefit model, which a lot of our fund sources are in here in Maryland, those agencies appear to be more confident that those grants will continue to move. Now, what they're not confident on is what are the criteria that would be put on those grants to move them. So I think what we're seeing across the landscape is that different agencies, we are getting, different information.
Do you have any of the federal agencies that fund you that have said don't spend any more money for now?
The position we're in right now is we're basically taking it a couple months at a time and seeing where we have disbursements and no disbursements because it's changing so quickly. So at DNR, we do not have disbursements through April. at this time.
I'm sorry. We do not have disbursements through April. I don't know what that means exactly.
So we wouldn't be receiving grant funding. We wouldn't be basically requesting that grant funding through April at this current moment. And so it allows us to prepare a little bit more for what is to happen. But that we've been kind of evaluating places where we might, do we need that money right now? And that's kind of been the assessment we've been looking at. But again, it really varies across those different federal agencies.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
A lot of the same. We receive most of our Bay-related funding from EPA, and so it's been little to no communication other than the official stop order of no money coming, and then the general announcement of the rescinding of that order. But we've not had communication since. I will say on another topic, we're dealing with avian influenza on the Eastern Shore, and then we just had a case in Montgomery County yesterday, and we work with USDA on that. Now, USDA, their ground team is working with us daily. We're on 3 calls daily with them. They're very engaged. They're very interactive. But now we're accruing expenses that we must get reimbursed. It's stated mandatory reimbursement from USDA, and we're being told, sorry, we don't have guidance.
Okay, in that case, they're
So it's
saying.
not a no, it's
I
a,
understand, I get it. But on the EPA side, do you have any communications from EPA to stop spending money?
we've had no communication to stop spending money.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you good? Joking.
I feel better already.
A little bit of a
for
joke, but
now.
I'll say this before we go. Look, please keep us abreast as best you can when you know. You got 3 very important agencies for us here in the state of Maryland for our viability, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can in the meantime. So if we can help by trying to reach out to our federal partners, let us know if you can give us some guidance on that, and we will be in touch, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more before you.
It's really important for this administration to work with the state of Maryland. I know that. And I believe eventually this administration will work with this administration in the state of Maryland. I think they're gonna have no choice. I'm glad to see the outcome of the Key Bridge. That right there made a statement to me that was a priority. And I thank our partners in the federal department that helped us out there. But I'm willing to do all that I can to work with this administration in the federal part and our part, that we make sure that those resources are a priority for all of our administration. And working with the senators here, I know how much and how important that is to every person that's in this room. So I know we are willing to work with you and at the same time work with our federal partners. I have a good chair that has shown the responsibility and caring for not just for this subcommittee, but for the state of Maryland and for our federal partners. And we're going to work well together. I believe that. So I want to thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you all very much. Next up will be the Department of Planning. For those who are going to be on the panel, we'll wait a second. Seems like we have a lot of folks leaving. All right. So next up is the Department of Planning. Bring up whomever you want to be on your panel. Madam Secretary, when we get to the agency, be sure to introduce your panel members. We're going to have our analysts do the overview.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Elizabeth Weibel, and I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the Maryland Department of Planning. If you look at page 1 of the analysis document, you'll see the fiscal 2026 allowance is $52.7 million, which is about $3 million decrease from the prior year. And about 80% of the budget is in general funds. The bottom of page 2 has some information about a proposed deficiency. This is $1.8 million in federal funding from the U.S. Department of Transportation that will be used to support a pilot program using drones to deliver healthcare resources on the Eastern Shore. Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows an overview of the fiscal 2026 budget as proposed. 42% of the allowance is for the Maryland Historic Revitalization Tax Credit, which is operated by the Maryland Historical Trust. This is $22 million in mandated funding for a reserve fund to support tax credits for rehabilitation projects at commercial historic properties. And the rest of the pie chart is divided into administrative and programmatic units. 15%, or about $8 million, goes to the management, planning, and educational outreach. This includes administering the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. 13% goes to the Operations Division, which handles administration and supports the Interagency Commission on School Construction. 8% goes to Museum Services, which operates the Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum and the Maryland Archaeology Conservation Laboratory. Page 6, Exhibit 2 shows the change in the proposed budget. Most of the decrease is due to one-time federal funds that the agency is receiving in fiscal 2025. There's the drone pilot program that I mentioned, and also $1.5 million, which the agency has received for the Maryland 250 Commission. Fiscal 2025 also had some one-time pass-through grants for the SHINE program at Maryland Humanities and a grant to the Maryland Center for History and Culture. Page 7 has some information on a BRFA provision regarding the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. This program receives up to $6 million of program open space funding annually, and most of that is for grants, although the agency is allowed to use up to 10% of that on operating costs. The BRFA provision would allow an additional $340,000 of that $6 million to be used for operating costs in fiscal 2026 for a grant software procurement for the Maryland Historical Trust. And this would come out of the overall $6 million, so it would reduce the amount available for grants by the same amount. Page 8 has personnel data. The fiscal 2026 allowance had 7 regular positions due to contractual conversions, and DLS has asked the department to comment on its plan for the contractual conversions. Moving on to key observations on page 9. There's an update on the Maryland 250 Commission, which was established to facilitate statewide observance of the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. That observance will be in 2026. In fiscal 2024, the Commission launched 3 small grant programs in partnership with Maryland Humanities to award grants to nonprofits and local government entities to develop their own local programs and internships related to the 250th anniversary. And through October 2024, Maryland 250 has received about $800,000 in state funding and a $10,000 grant from America 250 and has spent about $365,000. In December 2024, the Commission also received an additional $1.5 million in federal funding to support the grant programs. And the fiscal 26 allowance includes $250,000 in general funds for the Commission. So DLS has asked the department to provide an update on what the funding the Commission has available and whether the full $250,000 in the allowance will be needed for fiscal 26. The second item here is the Historic Revitalization Tax Credit. This is $22 million in general funds that goes into a reserve fund, which is then used to reimburse the general fund when tax credits are claimed. This reserve fund really serves 2 programs, the competitive commercial program, which receives $20 million, and the small commercial program, which receives $2 million. There's also a homeowner credit that people can claim directly on their taxes and is not funded by this appropriation since it's claimed directly on the tax forms. But this is mandated funding, $22 million. Prior to fiscal 2023, the funding was discretionary, and the program received $7 million in fiscal 22 and $3.5 million in fiscal 2021. In fiscal 2024, the program approved $20.4 million in anticipated credits for 10 competitive commercial projects with a total estimated rehabilitation cost of $93 million. In light of the current fiscal situation, DLS does recommend reducing fiscal 26 funding for the competitive commercial program by $2 million to a total of $18 million. And you'll see that recommendation on page 11. That concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our analysts? If not, Madam Secretary?
Are these working? Yeah. Hi, yes. For the record, Rebecca Flora, Secretary of Maryland Department of Planning. Good to see you all again this year. I want to introduce my team that's here with us to address any questions you may have. Starting to my right is our Assistant Secretary of Operations, Jeff Pan. And to my left is Director Elizabeth Hughes overseeing the Maryland Historic Trust. And we have Rod Cofield as Director of the Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. I would first like to just say, and I'm just for the sake of brevity, and I know that you all have busy schedules, so I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible and focus on what you have remaining questions around. But I do want to say that we're very excited about the progress we've made since I first came before you all 2 years ago. We have moved our Baltimore office, which has been a very exciting thing for us, out of State Center into downtown Baltimore. And while it took a lot of effort, I can tell you that it's just a marvelous space. And we continue to share it with others across the agencies in every way that we can. So that's sort of been a very big thing for us to just ensure that we're more productive and can do more with everything we're involved in. But I really want to focus in very specifically on the three things that came up in the great analysis by Ms. Weibel. The first one, let's just focus on Maryland 250. That was the biggest question I had 2 years ago when I came in. And I am so proud and excited to really share how much that has occurred there. Obviously, there's an annual report and you have all of the specifics and details, but clearly bringing the leadership that we've brought to it, not only in terms of the chair of the commission that's fully up and operating now and former Governor Glenn Denning, but also in the vice chair with Honorable Katie O'Malley, who's really through that leadership helping to ensure that all of the decision-making and the funding and everything is going through that commission. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our director of the overall program, Michelle Johnson, who has put miles and miles on across the state, working with locals on the ground with that program as we've really helped to make it something we can all be proud of. In just another year, in 2026, we're not far off. And so I know it's always one of those programs that people look at and say, well, are we getting the right outcomes from that? Is it something that you still need money for? Well, first of all, keep in mind, this is a short term. This will be done in 2027 when we close everything out and pass everything that we have gathered along to other future initiatives that may occur in that regard. And so the exciting thing about our program, and I want to mention just for benchmark purposes, state of Delaware has spent about $1 million that we're aware of so far on their program. And we have New Jersey up at about $25 million, Virginia at $22 million, Pennsylvania is around close to $10 million. That's just for benchmark. Because we're taking an approach that's very grassroots. We're trying to take the funds that we do have and that's been so generously allocated for this program and do that grassroots approach, which is why Michelle and her team have been really spending a lot of time on the ground to leverage what we have, to work with existing organizations across the state and basically come together as a statewide initiative, leveraging this really great moment for our nation. But in basically programs that are existing, but with that focus across the state during 2026. And so the approach has been, I think, one that we can have a statewide year-long celebration, which is why the mini grant and the approach that they've been taking with that program, I think really ensures that everybody's part of it in some way. And I wanted to just give that overview for that. In terms of specifically addressing the questions, we did provide you in our testimony in the brief specific details about the funds, how they're being used. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind everything's being well allocated in terms of our fiscal 25 year funds. They have been basically committed through a couple of different programs. I think the exciting thing about this, and you'll see the reference to the video program, that's really cool. I mean, it's a way to engage young people in history. and engage in the future. And what does service mean? Because we've taken such a different approach to that. Also, the baseball teams that we're engaging in. So it's a way of really bringing it to the people, so to speak. So that has been our commitment. And in terms of fiscal year 26, obviously, all of this is leading up to what is now not that far away. And we want to make sure we have enough in the bank, because through procurement and some of the things that we have to do, we have to be thinking well in advance, and we don't want to end up with a shortfall right when we need it the most, and we're right on the verge of something really special in just a year from now. So I'll leave that there, because the details are in your testimony, but I wanted to sort of share that overview picture of that. And we do have the Maryland 250 program, as you're well aware, is hosted at the Maryland Department of Planning. Director Hughes helps me by overseeing that on a day-to-day basis, and working with Michelle Johnson and how we do that, and of course, working with the commission members. The other area that I want to, and we can stop there maybe before I go to the next topic, which is the historic tax credit. Okay, the historic tax credit. This particular program, as I'm sure you're well aware in your communities, has been extremely successful. We have much more demand than we were able to actually respond to with that program. And so we've put the details in our testimony in terms of the amount of demand. Most recently, that was for that program, the $38 million in tax credits that were requested. This leverages private funds. It helps to revitalize communities. So we really believe, and we respectfully suggest that this is not the place to reduce, because of the manner in which it really does work to revitalize local communities and leverage private funds, and the amount of demand and success that it's had. However, we do respect the fact that you also have hard decisions to make. And if they feel that this is just one of those areas that you have to touch, we do make a recommendation that perhaps that you take a look at the small commercial component of the program as perhaps the more strategic approach to how we would do that. And Director Hughes can speak to that much more specifically in terms of why we've come to that rationale. But we really feel that the program and what it leverages and its work in communities and in our resources is very, very important, and it's been shown itself time and again. So that was the other prime area that you all have asked about. I believe there was also reference to our conversions, our contractual conversions.
Yes.
The big thing about that is that those areas are specifically within Maryland Historic Trust, and of course the subset of that, the Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. They're specialty areas, most often funded with special funds. So we're not dealing with an apples to apples comparison here. There's basically the ability to swap out is not as easy as it may appear on the surface, and we are extremely grateful for the general operation funds that will be used to help us with those conversions. We just won't be able to do them all in its entirety because of the specialty there. And once again, specific questions that you may have, I'll defer over to Director Hughes or Rod Caulfield that are specifically working with those people. And then, of course, our Assistant Secretary of Operations can tell you way to nauseam any specific deals you may want around those vacancies and the pins and the conversions. So I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, Madam Secretary. And before we go around, I'll say this. Thank you all for what you're going to bring to us in 2026. We're going to be able to, we're certainly going to be looking forward to something exciting in 2026 besides what's on the verge. And that's for a number of reasons, from elections to budgets to other things. So, but we're very excited about the anniversary, and I know that the team is all geared up, and we have every confidence that it's going to be a great thing. It's going to be a great thing. So, Senator Rosepep.
Thank you very, very much. The chairman is a successor to the late Senator Mike Miller, but I'm going to get in touch with my inner Mike Miller and say very supportive of the project. And he's looking down and paying a lot of attention to this, so we're going to do it well. I would like to get information when it's convenient on projects you've funded in my district. and activities, just so I can kind of plug into them and be helpful to them.
Absolutely, happy to do
So
that.
probably other members would be interested in that too.
Specific to Maryland 250 or the?
Maryland 250, I'm just talking about Maryland, I'm talking about Maryland 250.
Absolutely.
Maryland
Do that.
250.
Yeah, it would be terrific if you could do it for the.
We will do that, and also we're pushing these things out constantly, and so we'll also make sure you have up-to-date information of anything that's coming
That'd be
up.
great. That'd be
For
great.
everybody on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we'd all like to help.
District
follow
3, District 6, District 21, District
on it.
27. so
That'd be great. So that's number one.
appreciate that.
Number two, you get some federal money, so I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the other agencies. Who are you funded by, and what have you heard?
Yeah, we anticipated it. As I think was referred to in the earlier session, all of the agencies basically, way before this last week hit, have been preparing and really assessing exactly what the status is. In the case of our agency, we have a couple of key areas. One, of course, is there's a direct hit, the Maryland Historic Trust, and I'll let Director Hughes refer to that specifically. The other area you heard reference earlier to the SMART grant from the Department of Transportation. We are scrambling and working very heavily to make sure we draw down everything we possibly can before things are put to an end or make any obligations that we can't fulfill. But that is one of the other federally funded programs that we were able to be awarded last year. The other is the Appalachia Regional Commission, which is part of our agency, but obviously that's a 13-state entity. And so I'm already working and in touch with, we've been in direct communications because I'm the governor's alternate to the commission, with the folks in DC at the office there, basically doing what has been requested in terms of trying to get an exemption because we basically have to provide paperwork to get an exemption, and all 13 states are on it, so that we can ensure that potentially that program could get an exemption and just keep going on. So we're on top of that one as close as we can be. I would say the other one is
Okay, which agency is that?
the Appalachia Regional Commission.
I know what it is, but so it's its own federal agency.
It's not an agency, it's a commission.
A commission, but I'm saying the funder is the commission.
No,
Who is the funder?
the funding comes directly out of federal allocated funds.
From which agency? That's what I'm asking.
You know what? Sorry, I can't answer that. Special appropriations, I believe. I'll have to get
There
back
has to be an agency
that
that,
it actually
Comes
funnels
from, yeah.
through. I'm gonna have to get back to you.
well, maybe ask a question a different way. So who do you ask for a waiver from?
Oh, that's gonna be directly to the executive orders,
I'm sorry, to whom?
to the executive order that was issued.
No, what?
The
Office,
OMB.
OMB.
Yes.
So you think the commission, I'm really digging in the weeds here because
know.
it's important.
It is.
So your understanding is that the commission has to apply to OMB
Yes.
for an exemption?
Yes.
Okay, that clarifies it. I'm sorry,
Yes.
you had one more you were going to talk about.
Yes. And so, I know, I think that's it. I wanted to focus on that, but I do want to let Director Hughes speak specifically to where we would most likely potentially see the biggest impact.
Yeah, for the agency directly, we receive around $1 million out of Historic Preservation Fund money, which is administered by the National Park Service. And that money funds about 18 staff in whole or in part at MHT. And for a period of time, the grants portal where we submit our drawdown requests was shut down. It is now reopened, and just yesterday, we were able to submit our next quarter installment of drawdown money, and it went through successfully. We haven't heard any direct, any official communication from the National Park Service about either those operating dollars that SHPOs receive, or sort of more, I think significantly, to some of the president's executive orders addressing DEI and so forth. Specific grant programs that are funded through the Historic Preservation Fund, we've been the recipient of some. One entitled the Underrepresented Communities Grant Program, which is really about documenting resources associated with marginalized communities. We've received a couple of those grants. We have vendors already contracted to do that work. We wonder, will we not be able to?
And that's Park Service again.
And that's Park Service, right. So that's a concern, as well as the African American Historic Preservation Action I've forgotten the exact title, but it's really about looking at historic resources associated with the African American Civil Rights Movement. We received one of those grants. Also a similar concern, will there be an issue?
But has, like on those, has the Park Service said anything to you?
They have not, and we have not submitted a drawdown because we don't have expenses
I
to
understand.
submit yet.
But you
we
haven't-
haven't gotten any official.
So that's just a question mark?
Right, in our
Gotcha, I
minds,
understand.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, our biggest job right now is to make sure that we have compiled, and obviously this is happening across all agencies, compiling everything that, and then, of course, we already were drawing down everything we could possibly
Sure.
do before everything even hit this week, so.
Understand. Have we covered all your sources of money? Federal money? Federal
Oh,
money?
yeah, the other one I was gonna mention is the EPA, there, we have some brownfield funds
Okay.
that we utilize also, but I believe we have one more, I think, draw that we can do on those. Yes, so that would be another one that
But
could
have you heard
potentially-
anything from EPA?
Not directly,
Okay. EPA sounds a little sleep of the switch here in terms of
I think with
executing the
that
executive
one,
order.
yeah, there would be.
Interesting.
In terms of the triggers on some of this, I wouldn't anticipate a problem with that one coming the rest of the way through. So like I said, my highest area of concern right now is
I see.
related to MHT.
I think, switching subjects, Mr. Chairman, just one last question. AI, asking this of agencies, have different approaches, but I mean, a big part of what you do is manipulate data. And it would seem like AI would be a tremendous force multiplier and perhaps cost saver. And so what are you thinking about in terms of the opportunity for AI to improve your operation?
That is a great question, and I am going to say that I am so grateful that we have such a talented team. Our State Data and Analysis Center folks have, PhDs and demographers, and we are essentially constant. I think the biggest challenge for us is staying up to date because it's moving so fast, and in terms of being able to ensure that our team can get the adequate training to really be able to navigate all the pros and cons and everything that comes with AI. But I know that this is another one of those areas where ensuring that we've got the most up-to-date software systems, the up-to-date training, just to stay on top of all of these things. So for me, as the leader of the agency, those are the biggest concerns for me, is to be able to ensure that my extremely talented people have the ability to get the training and the software and the access to what they need to be able to utilize what's out there.
I mean, are you doing that or are you thinking about doing that?
Thinking about doing that.
Okay,
Right now, in these budget times, of course, it's always it's a challenge, prioritizing where do we put our efforts, where do we most need them, and it's all about prioritizing right now.
Well, let me just suggest this, and I'm just speaking for myself here, is I think there are material opportunities to save money with AI across functions, and it's going on in the private sector right now. And I'd like to see us be out front in terms of doing it in the public sector because we have budget problems. So
Totally agree, and a lot of the coding and, any way that we can look for those efficiencies, I will definitely go back and talk to my team.
sure, no,
about
that's
those
all I'm suggesting,
possibilities.
and maybe.
No, it's a great idea.
And maybe when you come back next year to us.
Okay.
Have like a plan with numbers attached to it. That'd be great.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to do budget language around that.
Couple with the 250 celebration. This is gonna be terrific, right? Yeah, any other questions or comments? Thank you all. This is a very exciting opportunity and time, and Jefferson Patterson Park, I'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Take care. Thank you. We have 7 witnesses to come up. Yes, for each, I'm going to call you by name. If you would leave that third chair up there for me, please. Sure. All right, thank you. I'm going to call up the first 3, Lindsay Baker, Luke Perez, and Miss Lucille Walker. Come on up. You'll have 2 minutes each. And I believe we have your written testimony as well, do we? Maybe, maybe not. If we have your written testimony, well, you only have 2 minutes, so you can express yourself however you see fit.
You were called first.
Okay, all right. Is this on?
Yes, ma'am. State your
Perfect.
name for the record and your organization.
Yep. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Baker, CEO of Maryland Humanities. And we are here to fully support the MDP budget with amendments. So with that being said, I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about Maryland Humanities. We're very thankful for the $257,000 in general funds that have been built into the FY26 budget. As our wonderful budget analysis mentioned, there is some money missing for Maryland Humanities that we're excited to talk about today. That money is SHINE. So from FY23 to FY25, Maryland Humanities was awarded $2.5 million for SHINE. That is funds that we regrant in terms of $10,000 general operating support to nonprofit organizations in Maryland. We focus on the tiny organizations. Budgets of $500,000 or less are the organizations that we fund. And we had the opportunity to give out 235 grants of $10,000. We've hit every county in the state. And last year, you all gave us homework when we came here. You said we want to make sure you get every county. We did our homework. So I wanted to report back. My Director of Programs, Alexandra Sonatas, behind me, said, make sure you tell them we did our homework. And my Director of Advancement over here, Claudia Allen, said, make sure they know that we listened and we responded. So the list of our awardees spans, like I said, the whole state and Baltimore City, but I did hear a question about who was funded in your district. So I'm going to start and focus there. Let's start with Senator Jackson. Bayside History Museum and the Launching Educational Assistant Program, Leap Forward, were both funded in your district. And this is specifically your district, not Calvert, Charles, and Prince George's County. The list is a lot longer if we go to the full county. Senator Salling, Baltimore Reservation Society was funded in your district, as well as Todd's Inheritance Historic Site. And many of these organizations, I know Todd's Inheritance is one, is a multi-year grantee for us. Oh, is that my 2 minutes?
You don't have time to talk about my district.
Oh.
You can get, yeah, please.
Field of
21,
First,
please.
and I'm District 21. So I'm a District 21 resident, and Field of First is the grantee from your district.
Thank you very much. I will say this, we are strong supporters of what you all do. And
Thank you.
Thank you all for doing your homework. I can report back to the chair about that. So. All right, next.
Good afternoon. I'm Luke Perez, Curator of Collections at the College Park Aviation Museum, which is operated by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. It is with great pleasure that I provide testimony in support of the Maryland Humanities Fiscal Year 2026 request for the State of Maryland's investment in their SHINE grant-making initiative. The mission of the museum is to preserve and share the history of College Park Airport, the world's oldest continuously operating airport in operation since 1909. Our nonprofit, the Field of First Foundation, provides essential support to our museum. The foundation received $10,000 in SHINE funding to help retain the museum's essential part-time staff. My organization knows how scarce opportunities for general operating support are, and I've greatly benefited from being a SHINE recipient. The museum and foundation serve the diverse families and local history enthusiasts of Prince George's and Montgomery counties. Our community cherishes the opportunities and programs our low-cost museum offers. That being said, the foundation receives less than $20,000 a year in donations. The museum serves 40,000 to 50,000 visitors annually and maintains a museum of 27,000 square feet and 10 aircraft with only 5 full-time staff and 5 to 10 part-time staff. Part-time staff turnover is very high due to the current economic climate. In the last 3 years, we have hired 30 part-time staff members, and most of whom stayed less than 6 months. SHINE support has diminished part-time turnover, thus freeing up full-time staff. One result is the development of the first new exhibits in almost 10 years. One is the groundbreaking exhibit on the first licensed Black-owned airport in the U.S., Columbia Air Center in Croom, Maryland. A virtually unknown history set to open later this year. By investing in SHINE, the state of Maryland allows SHINE's grantees to grow into more effective proponents of Maryland history and culture. It is my hope that you will include the vital funding for this ambitious yet sorely needed grant-making initiative in the FY 2026 budget, as well as support any efforts to ensure we'll continue FY 2027 and beyond.
All right, thank you very much. Senator Roosevelt, you want to lend anything? I did hear Croom in there, which is pretty good. From the southern part of the county. Yes, very good. Thank you very much. Ms. Walker, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I am Lucille Walker. I am the Executive Director of the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area, which is both a state and national heritage area. I'm also honored to be a co-chair of the Maryland Heritage Areas Coalition. So I wanted to come before you all mainly as to begin with to say thank you and to thank the administration for recognizing pretty much the economic impact that we make by having full funding in the budget at this time. We are unusual. We are 13 heritage areas throughout the state. We touch every county. we're 13 individual organizations, nonprofits. We're all structured differently. We're funded through the transfer tax from Program Open Space. So it's sort of a sidebar funding that it does not come from the general funds. It does go to planning, as was described. The Maryland Heritage Area Program is really unique. There are only 2 state-based heritage area programs. 2 states have them, and that's Maryland and Pennsylvania. We are so fortunate that Maryland understands and recognizes that we have this powerhouse of $1 invested from Maryland, $7 return on investment, and we have those figures in an impact report. It is tremendous, and we provide that kind of access. We provide a chance to really know the community, equity, and cost savings. So we're very grateful for that. We also did want to mention that the current BRFA that does address the 340, and I know there'll be a BRFA hearing, we're concerned about it because that 340 that will be going to Maryland Historical Trust, that is 3 major capital projects and 1 major program project. So for us, even right now, the demand is so high for these grants that we can't fund but half of what comes to us. And these are tremendous projects. These have incredible potential. These funds going back into your communities and your counties. So I know my time's up. I could talk about Maryland Heritage all day, but I appreciate you listening.
Thank you very much. We are very proud of the work you all do. And that impact statement, if you could share it with us.
I will.
For those who don't already have it, and any other information you all want to share, make sure that the committee has it. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Always good to see you, sir.
You as well.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next up, we will have Jeffrey Kahn, Bridget Carty, Elizabeth Hughes.
Bridget wasn't able to be here today, but.
Okay. Jeffrey Kahn, Elizabeth Hughes.
I already spoke.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. I think that may be it. Is that it? I'm sorry, Rod Cofield, you're already here?
I was already up there.
All right, I think that's it. Is there anyone else who signed up that I missed? All right, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you all.
Keep doing your great work. Keep doing your great work.
I know, it's actually good print, you know. Thanks. I'll get you all an invite to the opening and share the things.
Hope you guys get a break.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna have some sneak peek tours early April, so that we can do like shakedown versus kind of. And then the actual grand opening will be Wednesday, May 7th. So and then Mother's Day weekend is the big open.
All right, good afternoon. Next agency up is going to be alcohol. Will give us the agency overview.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is David Perpert, and I'm going to go over the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission's fiscal 2026 allowance. Chapter 12 of 2019 established the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission to provide oversight, regulation, and licensing for Maryland's alcohol and tobacco industries. Chapters 254 and 255 of 2023 modified the responsibilities of the Commission to include enforcing laws against the unlicensed sale and distribution of cannabis and changed the name to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission. The Commission's fiscal 2026 budget decreases by 1.3% to $12 million. Moving on to page 2, in fiscal 2024, the Commission entered into a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with the Maryland Cannabis Administration. The MOU outlines the enforcement responsibilities that are written in statute for the Office of the Executive Director, which are numbered 1 through 4 on page 2. The MOU also states that the Commission and the Maryland Cannabis Administration are to collaborate on the enforcement of unlicensed cannabis operations. In exchange for the Commission's actions under this MOU, the Maryland Cannabis Administration provides reimbursable funds. 29% of the fiscal 2026 allowance for the Commission is composed of reimbursable funds. Exhibit 1 on page 3 visualizes the allowance. About 3/4 of the funding is allocated for salaries and fringe benefits for 60 regular positions and 1 contractual full-time equivalent. 13% is for contractual services, including computer and software maintenance, and the rest is comprised of various other operational expenses, including rent and utilities. Exhibit 2 on page 4 highlights the biggest changes between fiscal 2025 and 2026. There are decreases of $812,000 due to one-time costs for an online licensing system and $725,000 for cannabis enforcement contracts. The largest increases are for salaries and associated fringe benefits, including the fiscal 2025 cost of living adjustment and $414,000 for employee and retiree health insurance. On page 5, you will see the personnel data for fiscal 2026. There are no new positions, and as of December 31st, 2024, there are 2 enforcement agent and 3 administrative vacant positions. Exhibit 3 on page 6 displays 4 performance measures. The blue bars represent the number of tobacco inspections, and the orange line shows the percentage of tobacco retailers in the state that received an inspection. 58% of all tobacco retailers in Maryland were inspected in fiscal 2024, which far exceeds the goal of 15%. The red bars represent the number of alcohol inspections that were conducted, and the green line represents the percentage of licensed alcohol retailers that received an inspection. In fiscal 2024, 28% of all alcohol retailers were inspected, which exceeds the goal of 9%. Exhibit 4 on page 7 displays the number of untaxed or contraband cigarette packs confiscated in blue, and the red bars represent the amount of untaxed or contraband all other tobacco products that were confiscated, which includes sticks and packages, among others. In fiscal 2024, there was a 54% increase in the amount of other tobacco products confiscated, and there was a 40% reduction in the number of confiscated cigarette packs. The Commission should comment on the reasons for the substantial increase in other tobacco products being confiscated and the decrease in confiscated cigarette packs. In Exhibit 5 on page 8, the number of alcohol violations are in blue, and the red bars visualize the number of tobacco criminal violations. In fiscal 2024, there was a 91% increase in the number of tobacco violations, and there was a decrease of 56% in the amount of alcohol violations. Moving on to the bottom of page 8, the Commission added 2 new performance measures with its latest Managing for Results, or MFR, submission. The first is the number of unlicensed cannabis inspections performed in fiscal 2024, which was reported to be 156. The second is the number of compliance inspections targeting underage sales, which will have data available with the Commission's fiscal 2027 MFR submission. Moving to page 9, the 2024 Joint Chairman's Report requested that the Commission track cannabis violations similarly to how tobacco and alcohol violations are tracked. Tobacco and alcohol MFR measures include the number of violations and the amount of confiscated contraband, but these 2 measures were not added for cannabis. The Department of Legislative Services recommends adopting committee narrative, requesting that the commission, beginning with the fiscal 2027 MFR submission, submit new measures that track the number of cannabis violations found and the amount of confiscated contraband. The recommended actions language can be found on page 10, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the analysts? Thank you. Great job. Welcome, Mr. Executive Director, and your team. As you respond to the analyst report and give us an agency overview, just make sure you name yourself and your panelists. You may proceed. Great seeing you.
Thank you. Good to see you too, sir. Thank you very much, Chair Jackson. Senator Rosapep, thank you very much for giving us a chance to come before the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee to talk about our FY26 budget request. First, I'd say we concur with the governor's allowance, and we thank Mr. Popert for a very robust discussion and analysis of our budget this year and ultimate concurrence. We're grateful for that. Just very quickly, a little history on us. In 2019, we were created to become the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. Before that, we resided as a function within the Comptroller's Office, General Assembly, for a variety of reasons, and not the least of which was, I think, realizing cannabis maybe was in the offing, decided to create a separate state entity called the Alcohol Tobacco Commission, eventually becoming the Alcohol Tobacco Cannabis Commission, which I may start referring to as ATCC as we move forward. So we became effective on January 1st, 2021. There was a slight delay in our startup. We were supposed to start 6 months before that, but COVID was here, and the General Assembly put that start off up by 6 months for us, and that proved to be pretty helpful for us. In starting us up, the General Assembly gave the Commission the authority to enter into MOUs, which we did early on, and again, just historically, and I think you are well aware of this, when we left the Comptroller's office, we had 27 positions that went with us that were already existing, and they were all agent positions. So these are people who could conduct inspections and investigations of the industries we were going to regulate. What we didn't have, and a few inspectors, a couple of inspectors. What we didn't have was we didn't have an office. We didn't have a house to live in. We didn't have that associated equipment. We didn't have IT support, HR support. We didn't have budget, finance, or procurement. We had nothing. And so we had an MOU that the General Assembly mandated we enter into with the Comptroller to make certain that when we left, we weren't cut off as an island to ourselves, left to just evaporate and go away, but rather we'd have these vital logistical services provided, and it worked beautifully, and we got them. Over the course of a few years, additional bills were passed. One of them was 1165, House Bill 1165, that completed the movement of all of the responsibility for regulating alcohol and tobacco from the Comptroller solely to the Alcohol Tobacco Commission. And then with the pass of the Cannabis Reform Act, we got our extra C and became the Alcohol Tobacco Cannabis Commission. And with that, we also got much needed funding and PINs to really start to build out what our agency was going to be and complete the transition to being a wholly independent state agency. With those additional funds, we were able to secure a new location. We moved to offices in Baltimore. Prior to that, we were stuck in the Treasury building with the Comptroller, sharing an office space with another division, and quite frankly, hoteling a lot of our workspaces whenever you could find an empty space to work. Now we have our own offices in Baltimore City, which are ample enough to house our current function, our operation, and luckily provided with storage location where we could keep, I'll say, sizable amounts of contraband product that we seize, all in our one location. So that was a good get for us. Those funds also gave us, as I mentioned, the PINs to build out our human resources function. We now have a human resources officer. We have an entire financial function with procurement, finance, and budget. We have IT support now from Do It that we're able to receive the support for them, but pay for it ourselves. And as I mentioned, we have our office staff. So we're in really good shape to continue as an independent state facility. Last year, we asked for some additional funds for some unique work. When we left the Comptroller's office, we had no licensing system for our issuing licenses and permits to our industries for tobacco and alcohol. We were able to get one very quickly by Ernst & Young, a program called Salesforce. It was very rudimentary and basic, but it was enough to get us on our own. That's what we still have. It requires a lot of staff hours to operate. It's not very mechanical, but it works. What we asked for last year was some help in building that out a little bit more because there are other features we could add to it, and to link it in with the state's existing one-stop system, which is the state's business system. You gave us funding for that. Thank you. We are underway currently to build those out. We've contracted with Ernst & Young again to build those out now. So the idea here is, and this is something I've been doing this in this role for a lot of years, and the industry has complained every year about why can't we be technology wise and smart. And the technology upgrades we've had up until today are, and we're getting there. We put a PDF form that you can fill out online, then print it off and sign it and mail it to us. That's about as technological as we've been. Now, when this is done, we expect it to be done in a few months. Our industry people will be able to go online, create an account, fill out the form. If you're not doing it correctly, you'll know immediately because you won't be allowed to proceed. That's big, so nothing's just waiting in an inbox somewhere for more information. You'll be able to make payment online. Once you've been approved, we're working so that you're going to be able to electronically get your certificate as well. So delays in mailing and costs associated with mailing will go down. The ability, the applicant will be able to keep real-time updates. And we're not talking about a couple of people. We're talking about thousands and thousands of applicants for licenses and permits and vehicle identification cards and things like that every year. So that's going to be a huge benefit. So thank you very much for that. Something else we asked for technology upgrade-wise in all of this was a records management system. And I'll speak about that in just a moment with a little bit more detail, and a policy manual, and also to be able to improve our website. If you haven't been on our website, I encourage you to check it out someday. It's really simple, atcc.maryland spelled out .gov. It's a fabulous website. We get a lot of accolades for it. It's very intuitive. We do employ some elements of AI, which I'm not educated enough to speak on, but I have people here who can. But we employ those elements. We want it to be a huge resource for our industries, for the public, and for you guys. So when you have questions about how many licenses are in a certain area, you're going to be able to check it out very quickly. We're getting there. We're building it out. And Mike Wynn's with us today here. He's our genius communications officer who has built this stuff out for us. So since we received the funding in FY24, we've entered into contracts with various people. Ernst & Young I mentioned. Lexipol I mentioned briefly by saying we're getting a new policy manual. Lexipol is giving us, we have just entered into this contract, and I have a meeting next, I think it's next week, with them to start building out our policy manual. I'm going to just mention this one thing because Chair Jackson, I think this might mean something to you. The policies that Lexipol will be creating for us, we're not an accredited agency, but these policies are, they would pass muster for accreditation. I don't see us going down that route. It's probably not necessary, but just to give you a sense, these policies are essentially nationally recognized, tried and true policies tailored to a Maryland law enforcement agency. So I just wanted to make mention of that. And the other thing it does is this Lexipol will provide annual in-service training for our agents, which are sworn police officers, mandated to get training every year. This will do that training for them, so it's really kind of a big deal. Another contract we entered into is with a company called Mickett. Long and short is wholesalers of alcoholic beverages are not allowed to provide credit to retailers, hard and fast. This credit control system we have, it's an electronic system that the wholesalers have to populate and also have to check each time before they make deliveries to make certain that someone isn't on the credit control list, which simply means a retailer who's gone way beyond the period of time to pay the bill and is late. When they get put on there, essentially it tells the retailer, and this has been on the books for years, you have to pay by cash until you square that up. That system's antiquated. This particular system has been around with the state longer than I have, and I've been here for over 22 years. The company that built it is not supporting it any longer, so we're just having it new and built. That's underway currently. Colossus Inc., also known as Caliber, which might mean something to some of you, but Caliber, it's a records management system that we have nothing of right now. We have a patchwork of what have been working for us, Google Sheets and Docs. That's been our case management system. This is an actual case management system. Data collection system will allow us to do all sorts of queries and reports. And also, very importantly, this particular system that we have is being used by the Maryland State Police, the Department of Natural Resources, the Maryland Transportation Authority, and a lot of local law enforcement. And we can allow each other to have access to this data so you know what's happening. You don't walk up to a car and not have, if it's been stopped somewhere before, you're going to have some information about that. You're going to just have a lot of information that we've shared amongst all these law enforcement agencies. And then the last thing, as I already mentioned, is our website. I'm just very, very proud of that. With all of these technologies that you funded for us last year, we expect them all to be in place by the end of FY25. In the instance that some of them are not, we will have our existing funds encumbered for the next year. We're not asking for anything new. We hope to either wrap it up this year or have at least the funding issues all taken care of this year. Our FY26 budget doesn't contain anything new. There's no over the target budget. We just asked for a certain amount to just continue status quo. And in fact, When that came in, it came in at $160,000 less than we asked for last year. None of that changes our commitment to public safety, to fostering economic growth, to strict, stern adherence to the laws and regulations surrounding alcoholic beverage and tobacco laws, and our commitment to the Maryland Cannabis Administration, the citizens of Maryland, to do our work in combating the illicit market of cannabis and encouraging consumers and businesses to go to the lawful market as regulated by the Maryland Cannabis Administration. So lastly, the governor's allowance, we think, does that for us, FY26. Fully support that allowance, and obviously here, we'll take any questions you have and be happy to answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you for your very in-depth response. I will say before I pass it on, I love the partnership efforts that you have employed, something that in the public safety arena, we survive that way. But what I'll say, with the Maryland State Police as well as Transportation Authority Police, quick question for you, because you talk about in your report, the report shows the confiscation of contraband. And so talk about your partnership with the local liquor boards, because they walk into these establishments that are selling contraband for cannabis. And so if you could expound on that.
If I could, because we mentioned the Maryland State Police and the Natural Resources Police just very quickly, they've been like outstanding partners for us for years. And we developed such a relationship with them that specific teams, like in the Maryland State Police, they had a PACE team that did interdiction work along I-95 for a variety of reasons that had to be reallocated resources. This team was so effective for us, and I'm being very selfish. They were so effective for us. Their troopers assigned to those units and our agents had each other's phone numbers and would call and say, hey, I got something. I mean, that would just happen. And so they were just a great set of eyes and ears out there that would make these cases for us. What we would, and the Transportation Authority, very similarly, their toll booth operators really got to know what these packages look like, because when people are smuggling cigarettes into the state, it's not a carton of it sitting on the, it's packaged a certain way, and there's a large amount of it. And not unlike cannabis, raw cigarettes, unsmoked cigarettes have a very strong scent. And once you've been exposed to it, you know that's what it is. We would go out to the training academies of border police agencies along the state, specifically along the border with Virginia, because taxes are so low there. And we would train those law enforcement agencies. We'd get involved in some in-service training with some of our other agencies like MSP, State Police, Natural Resources, and MTA, and show them what stuff looks like, what packages of how these things are put together. They're not as obvious as you might think, but once you see how they're packaged, it's incredibly obvious. So I think a lot of that, and Tom, I'd like to give some of this to Tom to explain more in detail with some of these operations, but a lot of our successes were based on our partnerships, our going out and training and having these partnerships. And we used to send people every day to Virginia, every day. We just don't do that anymore because we have broader responsibilities, so it's not as easy to do that. Now that we're $5 a pack for cigarettes, I think we need to start doing that some because it's big business in Maryland. About 25% of the people who smuggled cigarettes into Maryland were staying in Maryland. 75% was going to New Jersey and New York. Well, Maryland's like the second highest tax rate in the country now. They don't need to go to New York and Virginia, New Jersey. They can go to Virginia and then drive a couple miles into Maryland and bam, they're making the sales. So we need to retool since October 1st when that tax rate went up. We need to retool how we enforce that part of the tobacco products. But may I turn over to Tom to just address some of the concerns?
And before you do that, I appreciate you guys forward thinking in the agency and anticipating things regarding the industry. There's a point I want to go to before you do this.
Sure.
When we look at the time of the report, we had 2 of your vacancies, and I will say that our immediate past chair would be very proud of you, sir. With your vacancy rate, she would be very proud of you. She was here yesterday, so and a great job. But it says 2 agents and 3 administrative positions. Can you tell us where you are with that?
Yes, sir. The agents, we've already done the announcement. I don't know if we've done I think we did the interviews, in fact. They're going through background checks right now for those 2 positions. And now they can be a little long to do, but they're selected, accepted, and have conditional job offers. Our administrative positions, we just completed interviews either yesterday or Wednesday for one of the administrative positions in our reporting section. One of them, I've got something I'm holding on to for a moment because I want to do something with it. And then
Contractual front desk.
we hired somebody for that position. They're now. They started last week or the week before for the front desk. So we're making, we understand that's important to keep ourselves staffed. We're so small, we can't afford to not be staffed.
Absolutely,
So we try to
absolutely.
really stay on top of that, and our HR
Just keep us
officers
supportive of your progress in every segment and
Yes,
whatever we
sir.
can help you with.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
I'll be brief. I see Senator Roosevelt has a question. Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Akris. I am the Director of the Legal and Legislative Division for the Alcohol, Tobacco, Cannabis Commission. And like Executive Director Kelly, I concur with the fiscal year 26 Governor's allowance for the ATCC. Just be very brief. Chair Jackson, to answer your question, our vacancy rate is now at 6.6%. With the hiring of the front desk clerk, we'll probably get that below 3% with the hiring of these two agents, which should be within the next month or so once the background checks are done. Executive Director Kelly talked about the state of Maryland being a source state because of the excise taxes. Just to frame that out a little bit more, Virginia's excise tax is 60 cents, Pennsylvania's excise tax, and this is on cigarettes, $2.60, North Carolina's excise tax is 45 cents. Whereas Maryland's is $5. So that's the the reason we're becoming a destination state when you look at the surrounding jurisdictions. One of the questions raised by a DLS analyst Poper, and thank you again very much, really was a thorough debate in regards to the questions that you asked, were the additional 14 agents we were able to hire. When the legislature provided us with additional PINs, it was approximately 30 PINs, agents, procurement, finance, et cetera, in fiscal year 24. We were able to hire 100% of those PINs by March of 2024. So in doing that, we had 14 extra agents in the field doing all this work, which is why you saw that I think it was a 91%, that was the note the DLS analyst stated, a 91% increase in our seizures of other tobacco products. Just to level set with the committee, other tobacco products are everything but ESDs and cigarettes. So we're talking about the cigars, packages of 1 or 2 cigars. We're talking about snuff and chewing tobacco and things of that nature. And so when you have 14 additional agents on site at these premises, these tobacco stores, you're going to see more contraband coming out. There's actually, it's very interesting, and Maryland is unique in this sense. What we're seeing in terms of the illicit cannabis market, right? These are the intoxicating THC products that are being sold outside of Maryland dispensaries. A lot of them are being sold in tobacco stores. So you're seeing more of our agents, our 14 field agents, specifically that were designated for cannabis, really in those tobacco stores, and they're cross-trained, and they're seeing all this stuff. They're making covert buys, they're testing the product, and we're moving forward. In fact, we've had cases moving forward in Baltimore City and Worcester County. Those were a beginning of our pilot program in terms of doing that enforcement. So that's the reason why we saw all that increase in the OTP charges. And I'll close out my testimony just touching on a couple of things raised by a DLS analyst. I want to correct the record. In fiscal year 24, there were actually 2,953 THC inspections. We reported 156, which was stated by DLS. The ATCC accidentally entered that number into DBM. We had a transition with the new field enforcement director, and there's just a transition. And so now we're ready and able to report that data accurately. And we're out there doing a lot more inspections. We had, just as of December 31st, 2024, there were 1,459 tobacco business inspections, 999 alcohol business inspections, and 858 cannabis and THC product detection inspections. And this is as of December 31st, 2024. So we are hard at work doing the inspections. And in regards to the point about cannabis violations, there's a request that we add and provide a number for cannabis violations in fiscal year 27. I want to be clear that the ATCC does not interpret that as setting an MFR target for violations or products received, i.e. no quota on violations that we need to go out and get. What we're going to report to MFR is violations that we observe and that are charged, and contraband that is seized. So with that, I actually want to recognize, seated next to me is Ms.
I think we know her.
You may know her, Ms.
Congratulations, by the way.
Samantha Tapia
See you
Witt.
there.
She's our newly minted Fiscal Services Supervisor, and we're very grateful that she accepted the opportunity to work with the ATCC. She now oversees our budget planning, composition, and analysis, and like herself, myself, are available for any of the questions that you may have.
Absolutely. And then did I miss your response on your relationship with the liquor boards? Regarding the contraband, I mean, when they walk in the store, so if you could.
The liquor boards don't so much get involved in the contraband side. It's kind of an interesting thing. We regulate the manufacture of alcohol. We regulate the wholesale entirely, license it, regulate it, take action on it. Regarding retail, each local board issues those licenses and does some level of regulation with them and some level of enforcement. But beyond that, we do a lot of the enforcement for them. So a lot of our inspections are their businesses. And we end up we work with their boards a lot, and we great communication and coordination. But our roles are different. Most of the work they do is with underage consumption inspections. That's pretty much what they do. And we do everything else. And then when we find violations, we report to the liquor board and we simply become a witness for them.
Well, that's what I was trying to get to. I appreciate it. Thanks for clarifying that, because we have a responsibility. So
sure, absolutely.
We all do. We all do.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to say something to your colleagues and your friends?
I did not prepare a testimony, so you got me on the spot.
Classic. Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Yeah,
again.
great to see you. Congratulations to you.
And I'm enjoying the agency side, leading the budget unit now, getting caught up in archiving some stuff and the whole onboarding agency onboarding process, which is definitely a multi-year project, you can say.
As you know, I mean, look, you guys took a behemoth of a idea concept, and you drill down, you focus in, stay disciplined on what you need to get done, and we're proud. And so proud to be your partner, Senator Rosefett.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on your website. I went and looked at it while we were sitting here. It's a great looking website.
Thank you.
Very user friendly. And it has a characteristic that I find on many state agency websites. It's virtually impossible to find the name of a person who, I finally found the annual report, which named the chairman and named staff. And that's just free advice. I think it's a bad look to give the impression that it's all AI, and there aren't really people there. So just a suggestion.
There you'll see our headshots.
We'll take that.
If not, I'll make it more.
Yeah, we'll.
Yeah. It's free. I mean, I'm saying it's in a cheerful spirit, but
No,
you're not alone. But
we want it to be better.
Whenever I go to a website of a state agency, I'm trying like, who's there? And it's like, it's like a mystery. So anyway, just a thought. You're good-looking folks, so I wouldn't hide under a bushel.
Thank you.
But more seriously, I'm unclear on the cannabis side. And I have to say, I'm no expert on cannabis. I didn't even smoke marijuana in high school or college, or later, ever. So I'm like totally not expert on this like many Americans are. My impression from what I've heard in other states is it's still a lot of illegal business going on.
Senator, great point.
So tell us about what's going on in Maryland.
You betcha. It's huge business. Just to give you a sense of this, there are about, say, 6,000 to 6,500 tobacco retail licenses around the state.
Okay.
And overwhelmingly, they also sell THC. Now, and I say THC because when we first started looking into this a couple of years ago, into this cannabis stuff, we contacted Oregon, we contacted Washington State. People have been doing it for a few years. And all of them said, get hemp under control. We didn't, and we're sorry for it, and we're running after it now. Get hemp under control immediately. And I'm saying this because I mean it sincerely. You guys did a terrific job with our legislation because you didn't care what the THC was derived from. You cared about the quantity of THC. Doesn't matter. THC comes from marijuana. It also comes from hemp. And in doing that, it didn't matter what the source was. So while hemp federally is not illegal, because the Farm Bill, the U.S. Farm Bill somehow, I don't know how, but somehow says hemp's okay. And so things that are made from hemp are okay. Maryland said, we don't really care where you get it from hemp. If you want to sell hemp products in Maryland, that's fine, but the THC level has to be less than 0.5 milligrams per serving and less than 2.5 milligrams per packaging. And if you do that, that's fine. Anything over that, we don't care what you make it from. But that's what they're selling in all these stores. The cannabis-derived, the marijuana-derived cannabis largely is coming through the businesses like they should, the dispensaries from the Maryland Cannabis Administration, as they should. What we're seeing are these intoxicating hemp products that are vegetable, flower material that people are smoking, that are edibles, that are gummies. We're seeing them, and in fact...
I'm sorry, slow down, because I'm not really expert in this area.
Sure.
So you're seeing products that are illegal to be sold outside a dispensary?
Yes, sir.
That's what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Being sold outside dispensaries?
Yes, sir.
In liquor stores?
No, sir. Mostly in convenience stores.
In convenience stores?
In convenience stores, corner stores, any place that has where you can buy cigarettes and
I see.
other
Okay,
tobacco products. Most of them
I
have
understand.
that.
So, I know why they're doing it. They want to make money, but do they not understand the law?
They do, but it's a little tricky. July 1, 2023 is when the law went into effect. We went out in July 1 with brochures to all, because we looked to educate first.
Yeah, I understand.
So we went out with our brochures and said, this is the law, here's what you're allowed to do in Maryland. And the intent was by the end of August, we were coming back, and now we're getting serious. And if you're still doing this stuff, we're going to.
Makes sense.
So mid-August, we get hit with a court injunction in Washington County. The Maryland Hemp Coalition filed suit against us. And the judge out there took a look at this and issued an injunction saying largely, if you were lawfully selling hemp prior to July 1, 2023, you may continue to do so until such time the court determines where we go on this. And that's where we are. Most of these businesses
It's been held up by the court for 2 years?
Yes, sir. Now, it's been the court issued the initial injunction. The state has gone to the appellate court and had a hearing back in October, November, September. So there has been an appellate hearing. We haven't heard on that yet. We feel like the hearing went well. We're hoping it goes well, but in the meantime,
it's held up in court. No, I understand. So I didn't know any of that, so it's very helpful. What about illicit market not in convenience stores, like the old-fashioned way?
Not our area. That's not an area we're not authorized to take enforcement action. That gets into Kingpin and the street corner. That gets into local law enforcement.
And is any of that going on these days?
I don't know. I can't imagine it's not, but I don't know. I don't know.
I see. Okay, that definitely answers my question.
Sure.
You talked about AI. I'm asking all the agencies about that. So I do want to see real people, but on the other hand, AI is a tremendous opportunity to save cost and improve service. So what have you done with AI, and what are your plans to do stuff with AI?
Well, Senator, that's a great question. We actually have Mike Wynn here. I'll give the overview. If you want to dig a little bit deeper, we can answer further. But in crafting our website, most state websites are actually on SharePoint. It's a platform that's used by most state websites. We've transitioned over to WordPress, which actually allows us to do a lot more animations and start to introduce concepts of AI. And so what we're looking to do, we actually used AI to build components of the website that you see, and we're working on a chat box feature to use AI components to actually having our stakeholders start to engage with our website, ask our website questions in terms to direct folks to applications, to resources, to information, so as to cut down on not that we don't want folks calling us and answering those questions.
I'm with you. No, we're on the same page.
But this is more to streamline and make it more accessible to stakeholders across the state. So that is in our plans. We're hoping to kind of put the finishing touches on that in the end of this fiscal year, if not beginning of next fiscal year. But that's a component we wanted and we saw months ago, and we want to put this into our website.
That's terrific. So are you home alone doing this, or is there any support elsewhere in state government for an agency like yours to do this?
We have had a lot of support from Do It, but I'm going to tell you, I mean, our executive director really called out Mike Wynn, who's sitting here with us. We hit 5 grand slams when we hired Mike Wynn, because he actually is a coder. and he codes the website. So a lot of agencies will have a communications person who actually have to contract with an outside agency.
So you have in-house capacity.
We have in-house, and we're lucky that he's been able to do this before. He came to us from the Baltimore Community Foundation. We had worked prior for 10 years and built their website. And so we saw that as something that was a need that we were lacking.
I get it.
So you're going to see that.
So what help did you get from Do It?
The Do It worked with us to identify resources. Really, Do It is the gatekeeper in a lot of this.
They approve things.
They approve
They approve
things.
the WordPress and approve certain attachments that we.
So it was more regulatory than it was technical assistance.
Some technical assistance, we have to have a server, for instance, because our website's not on SharePoint, we have to have a server off-sense, and so Do It helped us negotiate those contracts. And whenever we're going to introduce new concepts, we work hand in hand with Do It to ensure we're in compliance with their policies before we launch anything.
No, I get that. It'd be great if you could provide us a little more detailed information on paper on what you've done with AI and what you plan to do with AI. Sure. I assure you, of all the witnesses we've heard so far, you're way down the implementation curve. So we'd love to get that on the record.
Sure. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Not a problem.
Terrific. Thank you all very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good to see you too.
Next up, we have MSOF. And our analyst will give us the overview. Feel free to come on up or stay where you are until we're ready. It's up to you.
So we're in groups of 6, so.
Absolutely, we do 3 and 3.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Jackson and committee. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS forecast for the Maryland Emergency Medical System Operations Fund, or MEMSOF. The MEMSOF provides annual state budget support for the state's emergency medical services system. Chapters 718, got that out of order already, 717, 718, and 719 of 2024 modified a revenue source to the fund, as well as increased expenditures for the Senator William H. Amos Fire, Rescue, and Ambulance Fund. Beginning in fiscal 2025, the source of revenue for MEMSOF is up to $24.50 of a $40 annual surcharge on motor vehicle registrations, or up to $49 if collected biennially. Funding from a $7.50 moving violation surcharge has also been credited to the fund since fiscal 2014. As shown in Exhibit 1 on page 3, the fiscal 26 allowance provides for $110.6 million in total expenditures, with approximately 51.7% of those supporting the Maryland State Police Aviation Command. Of MSPAC's planned expenditure, $5.5 million is contingent upon legislation expanding the allowable uses of the MEMSOF. That's a provision in this year's BRFA. That's HB 352 or SB 321. That would allow the special fund to support the general operations of MSPAC instead of only the medically oriented functions. The Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems receives approximately $21.7 million in the budget. And Exhibit 2 on page 4 shows MEMSOF expenditures from fiscal 2024 through 2026. The working appropriation includes deficiencies for the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute, or MIFRE, MIMS, and the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, as well as MSPAC. MIFRE receives approximately $679,000 for salary enhancements via deficiency. MIMS receives $280,000 for the Parole Tower renovation project, which is also funded in fiscal 25 with $1 million in general obligation bond funding. A deficiency removes funding for shock trauma from MEMSOF, though it remains an eligible use of the fund. The 3 chapters from last session created a new funding source for it, and that it's going to appear under, I think, the Maryland Health Regulatory Commission budget program. Finally, a deficiency would reduce MSPAC general fund expenditure and increase its use of the MEMSOF by $5.5 million in fiscal 2025, contingent on legislation expanding the fund's eligible uses. So that's $5.5 million from fiscal 25 and 26, which are both contingent on the BRFA provision. The allowance expenditures increased by 10.8% compared with fiscal 25 spending. Most of the growth is attributable to higher expenditure for MSPAC. In addition to employee compensation enhancement funding, MS PAC's costs increase for overtime and due to higher maintenance and repair costs for the state's helicopter fleet. MIMS expenditures from the fund increased by 12%. The agency receives additional funding for one new commercial ambulance inspector position, and software contract costs increased as well. The AMIS fund grows to the level mandated by chapters 717, 718, and 719. Then turning to page 6, Exhibit 3 shows MEMSOF revenues and expenditures from fiscal 2015 through 2024. Revenues outpaced expenses through fiscal 2017, but were lower than expenditures during the 2018 through 2022 period. The fund received general fund cash infusions in fiscal 23 and 24, enabling it to close fiscal 24 with a balance of $17.8 million. Though actions were taken to reduce the fund's expenditures in fiscal 22 and 23, expenses then rose about 20% between fiscal 23 and 24, resulting in a net operating deficit again. As shown in Exhibit 4 on page 7, MVA registration fee income reached a peak of $73.8 million in fiscal 2019. Over the period in the exhibit, the income source was pretty stable, averaging about $71.5 million per year. Each year during this period, the fund received $14.50 from the $17 motor vehicle surcharge. Because the surcharge couldn't support the fund's expenditure without general fund support, Chapters 717, 718, and 719 increased the annual surcharge. Particularly for fiscal 25, the resulting increase in revenue is difficult to predict, but the new level is expected to be substantially higher than in fiscal 24. Exhibit 5 on pages 8 and 9 compares assumptions made by DBM and DLS when preparing forecasts of the fund. Exhibit 6 on page 10 provides the DLS forecast through 2031. DBM's forecast, which goes through 2030, is provided on page 17 or Appendix 2. The largest differences between the two forecasts relate to estimated MVA registration fee revenues, and as well as with the growth rates associated with MIFREs, MIMS, and MS PAC expenditure starting in fiscal 2027. In most years, or previously, the DLS and DBM forecast estimated the revenues for the MVA for the MVA source by applying growth rates in the registration fee income from MDOT's Consolidated Transportation Program forecast to the most recent year of actual data. And so using that methodology, the DBM forecast predicts that the income to MEMSOF would be about $100.9 million for fiscal 24. They're using December data. Looking with our January data, the DLS forecast estimates that they'll be at $94.2 million. With those amounts being 30.4 and 23.6 million higher than fiscal 24 actual revenues. It's difficult to precisely estimate the increase in registration fee amounts due to the change in fees for which a full year of data is not available, potential changes in consumer behavior resulting from these and other MVA changes, proposed legislative changes in fiscal 25, and proposed regulatory changes. Assuming that the number of registrations subject to the annual EMS surcharge remains constant and that approximately 1/2 of owners who pay their registrations biennially are evenly distributed across the 2 years, fiscal notes for chapters 718 and 719 estimated that special fund revenue for MEMSOF would increase by at most $45.6 million annually beginning in fiscal 25. Neither DBM nor DLS predicts that with our old methodology, so moving into the fiscal 26 estimate, the DLS forecast applies the whole $45.6 million in growth to estimate like what the new income expected level will be. In addition to changes in the surcharge level, Chapter 717 authorized installment payments of registration fees as determined by the MVA. Though the option for a 1-year vehicle registration previously existed, it was only offered by request. At the start of fiscal 25, customers registering or renewing their registrations were given the option to pay in a 1 or 2 year period. So Exhibit 7 on page 12 relies on data which was available as of January 9th of this year, shows that many more consumers are registering for 1 year and starting in fiscal 2025 than they had in previous years. We expect that absent other changes, the impact of consumer behavior shifts on registration fee will normalize in fiscal 2026. But it's possible that there are other changes. So the changes to car registration collection schedule have been proposed in this year's BRFA. A provision in the BRFA would allow the collection of a reasonable installment fee impacting collections in fiscal 2026. It's not yet known how much that might change the revenues by. Additionally, a 3-year registration option could become available in the future and was published in the Maryland Register back in December. The second major difference between the forecasts is the growth rate methodology. DLS is continuing to apply a 10-year average growth rate, but DBM assumed a 5% growth rate to forecast future expenditures from MIFRE, MIMS, and MSPAC, while their methodology is more conservative for 2 of the agencies impacted. It's 1.9 percentage points lower than for MSPAC. So by fiscal 2030, the DLS model estimates that MSPAC expenditures would be $67.6 million, while DBM's methodology projects $59.3 million. Based on these assumptions, the DLS forecast projects that MEMSOF will remain solvent through at least fiscal 2031 with an estimated closing balance of $20.5 million. Revenue sources are not inflation sensitive, so expenditures will exceed revenues over time. The current forecast predicts that ongoing expenditures will outpace revenues in fiscal 2030. DBM's puts that date in fiscal 2028. I'll also note that if MEMSOF expenditures did not increase in fiscal 25 and 26 to reimburse the general fund as called for in the BRFA provision this year, the fund would earn about $1.4 million in additional interest income by fiscal 2030. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions for our analysts? Thank you for your report. You all can proceed as you wish. State your name, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Welcome, by the way.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the status of the Maryland Emergency Medical Services Operation Fund with you today. My name is Sally Showalter, and I am a member of the State Emergency Medical Services Board, whose members are appointed by the governor. We oversee the statewide EMS system, review and approve the budgets of the entities supported by MSOF. I'm a resident of Calvert County and represent Maryland's rural counties on the board.
No bias here.
Our Maryland EMS system is well recognized as a national model for emergency care. Our system is made up of volunteer and career EMS professionals, medical and nursing personnel, communications, transportation systems, trauma and specialty care centers, along with hospital emergency departments. Our goal is to get the right patient to the right place in the right amount of time while delivering the highest quality of care, patient care to all. We also strive to do all the above in the most cost-effective manner and within our budgetary constraints. Last year's General Assembly passed critical legislation that increased the vehicle registration surcharge in order to eliminate a looming and potentially disastrous structural defect in the deficit in the MSOF. That increase also provided support for the Shock Trauma Center, the Maryland Trauma Physician Services, and the Amos Fund grants. You will hear from our partners today how vital this funding is to their day-to-day operations. We hope this funding change would result in the health of the MSOF well into the next decade. However, the latest analysis predicts the MSOF to be solvent only to 2030 or perhaps 2031. The MS Board is proud to work collaboratively with all of our partners. As Maryland residents, we are all very fortunate to have so many dedicated professionals doing a tough job 24/7. We appreciate the legislature and support of the governor. And I can assure you the board will continue to pay close attention to how all funding is being utilized. Thank you on behalf of the MS Board. And I would now like to introduce Dr. Ted Delbridge, the Executive Director of MIMS.
Thank you very much. And we say it to everyone who comes here, but look, we mean it. We are your partners, and the General Assembly, our committee specifically stepped up. And we'll continue to try to find a way to make sure we stay solvent. It's vital. It's vital for us. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators. I'm Dr. Ted Delbridge. I'm the Executive Director of MEMS, the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems. I thought I'd spend a bit of time explaining how the MEMSOF supports the work of MEMS to the benefit of the EMS system throughout the state. MEMS is an independent state agency that coordinates all components of the statewide EMS system. It does that by medical oversight, promulgating statewide clinical protocols, the guidance that EMTs and paramedics use to take care of patients, licensing and certifying EMS clinicians, maintaining and operating a statewide emergency communication system, and designating trauma and specialty centers. The MEMSOF provides support for MEMS in these initiatives that benefit the entire statewide EMS system. And of course, we're grateful for the efforts of the General Assembly. And as Ms. Showalter pointed out, the ongoing viability of the fund, especially by way of legislation that passed last year. The 2026 MEMSOF budget overview analysis by Madeline Miller is thoughtful, and we're grateful for her work. The backbone of Maryland's EMS system is nearly 20,000 men and women, EMS clinicians who are licensed or certified by MEMS, who answered last year more than 1 million calls for help and conveyed more than 570,000 people to Maryland emergency departments and trauma centers. They use clinical protocols developed by MEMS with the aid of subject matter experts. They call on a statewide EMS communication system maintained by MEMS to provide the capabilities for them to consult about patient care decisions with physicians at EMS base stations throughout the state. They transport patients to designated trauma centers and specialty centers, including 10 trauma centers, 24 cardiac intervention centers, 39 stroke centers, 2 burn centers, and 15 perinatal centers throughout Maryland. In just 2024 alone, MEMS re-credentialed 31 of those facilities. MEMS closely monitors the EMS to emergency department transfer time. That's the elapsed time it takes for EMS personnel to transfer responsibility of care for patients they take to emergency departments from themselves to emergency department staff. We supply that information weekly to emergency department leadership and hospital leadership throughout the state so that they can affect changes and make progress in prioritizing arriving EMS patients. And we also convey that information to the Health Services Cost Review Commission on a monthly basis so that they can use it as part of their challenge to engage hospitals in the emergency department dramatic improvement effort that they're undergoing. Once the EMS treatment is completed, the care provided is documented on a statewide electronic patient medical record, eMeds, that is coordinated by MEMS. We continue to work with CRISP to make sure that an EMS encounter is counted in the patient's longitudinal healthcare experience and available for next caring clinicians down the road. We support public efforts to provide emergency care until EMS arrives at the scene. An example of that is the public access automated defibrillator program. We track 16,000 defibrillators that are stationed in more than 9,000 different locations throughout the state, and in the past month or so, just recently, have inaugurated a new EMS AED registry to help keep track of those defibrillators and to help us manage the workload that is included in mandates to deploy AEDs in restaurants and grocery stores, which just became effective January 1st, and upcoming to co-locate naloxone with certain AEDs in public places. These are just a few examples of how the MSOF funding helps sustain Maryland's EMS system, and without it, we would not be able to do the work that we do to benefit people throughout the state of Maryland. And with that,
two questions.
Yes, sir.
Before we pass it on. One, I see you spoke of the 31 hospital re-verifications. Is that a typical number for a year, a calendar year?
yes. More or less. Last year was a particularly robust number because the majority of those were cardiac intervention centers that all require re-verification of the same calendar year.
Okay. And what does the recruitment look like for you guys with EMS? I know one of my counties in Calvert County, it was the last fully volunteer fire rescue service county, and the county government, did what they needed to do to protect the citizens there, and have begun to hire, bring on board paid EMS workers. So what's your recruitment look like to make sure that you remain, at a decent level or a good level, or the level that you would like to have across the state?
So we do a pretty good job of creating emergency medical technicians and paramedics in the state. Last year certified more than 1,500 EMTs, nearly 400 paramedics. Our challenge is with attrition. We can recruit and create new people. Keeping them engaged over the course of a career is more challenging
Yeah, we're seeing that across the state, so, anything we can do to help y'all, let us know. You have to guide us, though.
Thank you.
So, appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Captain Thomas.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, other members of the committee. My name is Captain Jeffrey Thomas. I'm the Assistant Commander of the Maryland State Police Aviation Command. I would like to formally thank Madeline Miller for her thoughtful analysis. I would like to thank the members of this committee for your support of the Aviation Command as well as our MSOF partners seated before you here today. The Maryland State Police Aviation Command has proudly served Maryland for 54 years, delivering critical services like medevac, law enforcement, search and rescue, and disaster response. We operate 10 advanced AW-139 helicopters and a fixed-wing aircraft from 7 bases. The Aviation Command has transported nearly 200,000 patients since 1970. The department has submitted written testimony which provides some background information on our program and mission statistics for the past year. In 2024, the Aviation Command personally and professionally safely completed 1,878 medevacs, 201 search and rescue missions, 14 aerial rescue operations, and 1,935 patient contacts. Our life-saving whole blood program continued to advance with 211 units transfused to 163 patients since its inception, including 134 units and 100 patients in 2024 alone. The program operates efficiently. We rotate 1,163 units of blood without waste by returning the unused blood to shock trauma for other patients. The Aviation Command expresses deep appreciation for the collaborative efforts of the House and Senate Budget Committees, the MSOF Coalition, the Emergency Medical Services Board, the Department of Budget Management, the Department of Legislative Services in addressing our budget challenges. The resolution of MSOF's forecasted insolvency during the 2024 legislative session was vital. With your continued support, the Aviation Command is committed to utilizing the fiscal year 2026 budget effectively to uphold its mission of delivering exemplary airborne public safety aviation services to Maryland citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. It's terrific, having grown up in the law enforcement world and watch you guys in action, and obviously, and also, unfortunately, but fortunately, I had to experience it personally with my son when he was in high school. So you guys were there. So we'll continue to support. Any questions for this current panel? All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. Start when you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Michael Cox. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute at the University of Maryland. The Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute is the state's comprehensive training and education system for emergency responders. Statewide system, we train somewhere in the area of 25,000 to 35,000 emergency responders a year. We do this from 6 of our own full-fledged fire training academies around the state, as well as 12 of the municipal and county training academies, mostly in the metro area. We are proud to be part of this system, and it is integral to be able to function in the manner that we do to ensure an appropriate, effective, and efficient emergency response system. So we appreciate all the support we get from this committee and the legislature. And I have submitted written testimony, so I don't want to take up too much time in the interest of you all's time. So I will yield back my time.
Well, we appreciate the terrific work you all do there, and you have always done that there, and we appreciate you all hanging around today. It's a pretty long day today, but,
Good afternoon, Mr.
Great to see
Chairman
you.
and members of the committee. My name is Eric Smothers. I'm the past president of the Maryland State Firefighters Association, and I'm also the chair of our SIMSAC Committee for the state of Maryland. The Maryland State Firemen's Association serves over 360 volunteer fire, rescue, and EMS departments and over 24,000 volunteer personnel across the state of Maryland, all of which are trained through the various departments and partners that you see before you today. The MSOF fund that we received through the Senator Amos's funding is provided for both the career and volunteer departments across the state of Maryland. It allows us to maintain Maryland's operational readiness across our state 24/7, 365 days a year. With that, it is, as you mentioned before, you notice a lot of departments and counties are now starting to be combination services because it gets more and more difficult for us to maintain some of our volunteers across the state. A lot of our volunteers already have a full-time job, and the volunteer portion is the after part when they get home, and to continue to try to maintain their certifications, not only as operational fire and rescue personnel, but also EMS across the state on an annual basis, which we gladly do. The critical funding that you provide, the legislative body has provided the General Assembly through the MSOF, allows us to continue to reach out and provide those services in each and every one of our communities across the state. And we continue to want to work with you to make sure that our solvency maintains in place. I can tell you from traveling around the different states as the past president of the Maryland State Firemen's Association, when I go to Maryland, go to Virginia and West Virginia, folks always ask how Maryland is able to do that. And it's because of the partnerships that we're able to maintain here to provide the vital services from trauma care to EMS and fire and rescue. And we could not do that without your support. So thank you, sir. And I'll yield back my time as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Christy Snedeker. I'm the Vice President of the R. Adams Cali Shock Trauma Center. I'm extremely proud to be sitting here with my partners in MSOF today, and want to just thank you so much for last year's legislative session and the work that you put in to supporting Maryland's trauma system. As the primary adult resource center for the state of Maryland, we take that responsibility extremely seriously. And through the MSOF funding and the supplemental funding that you've been able to award us, you've been able to ensure that we can practice at the fullest capability and capacity. And our patients thank you for it. Since July 1, we've been able to open up all operating rooms and be able to get our patients that need surgical care immediately and decrease their length of stay by 2 days, which is huge in the hospital setting. And it's extremely meaningful to those patients to get definitive care timely so that they can get back home and get back to work. It is important for you to know that it takes each and every one of us here as partners to make that happen, from ground EMS crews to flight paramedics to the training that they receive to get those patients at the right place at the right time. We also want to thank you because you've been able to allow us to expand our capabilities in injury prevention and violence intervention wraparound services. From July alone, we've been able to ensure that high schoolers, at least in Region 3, Eastern Shore, Calvert County, Health Department in Calvert County has been trained in Stop the Bleed training. It is our mission that every high school has a mandate that they get Stop the Bleed training. We can count on our hands since the beginning of the school how many times there's been gun violence in the school systems. And if we can impart Stop the Bleed training, life-saving measures in our schools, in our communities, in our private sector, we are doing ourselves a greater service in saving lives. And so for that, thank you. Thank you for the ability to do that through MSOF funding as well as the supplemental funding. I will say that based on the fiscal note and the budget analysis provided by the Department of Legislative Services and the Department of Budget Management from last year's legislative session, we believe that the R. Adams Cali would be maintained in the MSOF alongside our partners for the $3.7 million that we are traditionally awarded annually. We certainly are pursuing further clarification from our colleagues at DBM and your analysts as to this annual funding for clarification on those purposes. but I do want to just leave you with a debt of gratitude that you've been able to do, as Dr. Scalay would say, the work that we intend to do and are supposed to do as the park. So thank you extremely on his behalf as well.
Absolutely. So I'll say this to all of our friends in the audience. As appropriators, we find a way. We find a way. And so you can count on our service because you provide the service. As I mentioned briefly about, the service provided to my son when he was in high school. I've had the pleasure and the honor of being, having grown up in the public safety world. And I've had, it's kind of crazy to say I've had the honor of having to use your services at shock trauma because there is a comfort level that you all set for us, regardless of how challenging that circumstance may be for one of our, troops. And so nobody does it better than you all. And so again, know that from the appropriators, we will make sure that what's important is taken care of.
Thank
we
you.
just need to kind of figure it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that takes us all working together. So
Absolutely.
thank you all very much. Any questions from the panel? Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you. See you.
For hanging with us.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing for MSOF. And next up, we have Police and Correctional Training Commissions, Department of Public Safety. Madam Secretary, great to see you again today. Was it 24? I'm not sure if it was 24 yet. I'd also like to remind folks, that we're not only appropriators and find a way to make sure that we take care of the services that are necessary. We literally work on Fridays, so most people don't. And Mondays. And Mondays. Yep. Travel days for other folks, but we work, so. All right. Thank you all very much. Madam Secretary, we're going to have our analysts lead us off on the overview, and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Catherine Barber, and today I will be presenting the budget for the Police and Correctional Training Commissions within DPSCS. The PCTC provides staffing and administrative services to two commissions, the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission, MPTSC, and the Maryland Correctional Training Commission, CTC. MPTSC sets the minimum selection and training standards for police officers, while CTC sets them for parole and probation, juvenile justice, and correctional personnel. The fiscal 2026 budget totals $13.7 million, which is an increase of $1.3 million or 10.3%. Exhibit 1 on page 3 displays the fiscal 2026 allowance categorized by major spending area. 60% is dedicated to personnel costs for instructors and administration at approximately $8.3 million. There's an additional $2 million in special funds that's included in the PCTC budget from the MPTSC fund to provide resources that enhance law enforcement training and support commission activities. The fiscal 26 allowance increases by approximately $1.3 million, as shown in Exhibit 2 on page 4, which breaks down the itemized changes by expense type. The single largest change is an increase of $1.4 million for personnel costs related to statewide salary enhancements and fringe benefits. The fiscal 26 allowance provides 78 regular positions, of which 12 are transferred from other divisions of DPSCS. DPSCS should discuss the sources and purpose of these transferred positions. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows PCTC vacancies per month. As of December 31st, 2024, there were 13 vacant positions, more than 4 times the 3 vacancies reported in January 2024. However, according to DPSCS, 7 of those 13 vacancies were filled as of January 8th of 2025. Despite the upward trajectory of vacancies in fiscal 2025, turnover expectancy decreased from 6.45% to 5.33% in the allowance. DPSCS also reported that PCTC has faced recruitment challenges during calendar 2024 due to a lack of qualified candidates or candidates accepting other positions. They also stated that departmental priorities in calendar 24 were on mandated positions for correctional officers and parole and probation officers, which led to delays in PCTC recruitment. The issue I'd like to highlight today is a proposed transfer of the MPTSC fund balance by the end of fiscal 2025. This fund, as I said before, receives $2 million each year through special court fees. Historically, it has not been utilized at a rate that matches its growth, which has resulted in a significant fund balance. Before fiscal 2024, the agency had used the fund for a few items, but was slow to expend resources. It had spent less than $750,000 combined between fiscal 2019 and 2023, which left a starting fund balance in fiscal 2024 of $9.6 million. In response to consistent underutilization of the fund, the BRFA of 2024 expanded the allowable uses in fiscal 24 and 25 alone to include correctional training and equipment needs. At the same time, language in the fiscal 24 budget required PCTC to provide a spending strategy to address oversight and underspending concerns. In fiscal 24, PCTC reported increased expenditures of $2.4 million. However, $2 million of that was due to a transfer of funds to support other PCTC functions. Language in the fiscal 25 budget requested an updated spending plan and timeline. As of August 1st, 2024, the updated plan anticipated that total spending for fiscal 25 would be $4.2 million. However, the fiscal 25 working appropriation only includes $2.7 million in special funds from the fund, meaning an additional appropriation would be necessary to meet the spending goal. DPSCS should provide the total amount of MPTSC funding expended in fiscal 2025 to date and discuss which of the planned expenditures are being prioritized. The BRFA of 2025 as introduced includes a provision that authorizes the governor to transfer up to $7 million from the MPTSC fund to the general fund by the end of fiscal 2025. This is illustrated in Exhibit 4 on page 9. If PCTC expends the full $2.7 million MPTC appropriation in fiscal 2025, the transfer would reduce the fiscal 26 starting balance from $8.3 million to $1.3 million. Prior to the proposed fund balance transfer, the strategic spending plan was estimated to expend about $3.8 million in MPTSC funds in fiscal 2026. These included building a simulation training environment, maintaining the training and oversight database and software, hosting guest speakers, hiring adjunct faculty and a training coordinator, and providing annual training to staff. As a result of the fund balance transfer proposed in the BRFA, projects outlined in the spending strategy might face delays beginning in fiscal 2025. Furthermore, given that expenditures in fiscal 2026 through 2028 may exceed available fund balance and appropriation in those years, a new spending strategy appears necessary. DPSCS should discuss a new timeline and plan for initiatives supported with the MPTSC fund. DLS concurs with the governor's allowance, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a question, Senator Young, for our analysts? All right. Thank you very much for your detailed report. Madam Secretary?
Good afternoon, Chair Jackson, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, and I'm the Secretary of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today is Joseph Sadal, Deputy Secretary of Administration, Executive Director Kate Gossett, Deputy Director Matthew Milady, and Executive Director Wayne Silver are behind me. The department, as well as both commissions, appreciate the collaboration with the Department of Legislative Services and Ms. Barbara's great work and analysis. The department would also like to offer a thank you again to DBM analyst Christina Hore-Tunion for advice and guidance she provided during this budget. Again, as always, this is 30 years for me in the department, and I am honored to be here to represent and testify this budget on the behalf of those dedicated and hardworking professionals who come to work every day and uphold the mission of our department. The department operates the Public Safety Education and Training Center, a large training complex located in Sykesville, Maryland, comprising classroom and administrative space, a physical training center, driver training facility, firearms training facility, a scenario-based training building. The department also houses the Police Training and Standards Commission and the Correctional Training Commission. In my capacity as secretary, I am the chair of the Correctional Training Commission, and the department supports each commission with finance, procurement, human resources, and other related administrative staff. In the analysis, the Department of Legislative Services asked the department to respond to 3 issues. The first issue the department was asked to comment on are the sources and purpose of the additional positions that were transferred. The FY26 allowance includes 12 additional positions that were transferred to the Police and Correctional Training Commission and other divisions within the department in FY 2024. 9 of these PINs were transferred as part of the department's ongoing effort to convert contractual positions into permanent roles, ensuring workforce stability and compliance with personnel standards. 2 of the PINs were utilized to bolster the Certification and Compliance Unit and an Assistant Director for Law Enforcement Training. These transfers are part of a strategic initiative to strengthen PCTC's role in developing and retaining a highly qualified public safety workforce. These reallocated positions help address long-term staffing needs. The second issue we were asked to comment on is the total amount of MPTSC funding expended in FY25 to date and discuss prioritization and planned expenditures. The FY25 year-to-date expenses of the MPTSC fund are over $135,000, and the encumbrances are nearly $600,000. FY25 features over $3 million in approved planned spending that has yet to be encumbered. One of the Commission's prioritized expenditures is the Multi-Interactive Learning Objectives System, which can be used to improve decision-making while incorporating de-escalation response for police and correctional officers. The Commission has also recently allocated funds to purchase advanced trauma care simulators, which will be used to provide realistic training environments involving medical trauma that a police officer may encounter. Ongoing priorities for the remainder of the FY25 outlined in the strategic plan also include new instructional training initiatives, additional speakers for the 2-speaker series program, and professional development for staff. The speaker series will focus on program development, including leadership and wellness. Additional approved projects include physical agility equipment, 2-way radio replacement for police training, and the first phase of renovations for the dedicated commission meeting room. You can find the brief summary of each plan prioritized expenditure for FY25 in the written testimony I submitted, as well as the strategic plan outlined in the Joint Chairman's report response to the Police Training and Standards Commission fund spending and timeline. The last issue we were asked to comment on is the new timeline and plan for initiatives supported with MPTSC funds. The Joint Chairman's report submitted in August of 2024 provides a revised timeline and details of specific initiatives and planned expenditures of funds through FY28. The strategic plan identifies both short and long-term initiatives with a focus on addressing gaps and improving law enforcement training. The plan was developed based on the annual fiscal appropriation of $2 million and accrued interest. As a living document, the plan is reviewed annually with staff and Police Training and Standards Commission to assess progress in meeting Commission's goals and objectives for the current and upcoming fiscal years. The Commission also considers legislative updates, mandated training, and new trends in law enforcement that may require shifting priorities within the timeline. Annual fixed expenditures must also be included. The proposed budget reductions will delay the implementation of the capital construction project for the scenario-based simulation training environment. Several projects are one-time funding expenses, but many are ongoing programs that rely on funding allocations being rolled over into future fiscal years, such as classroom technology updates, capital projects, the Innovation and Design Center, and curriculum development and revision. Once the budget is approved, a final adjustment will be made to the strategic plan and the timeline. In conclusion, I am again truly proud of the training and initiatives designed to support the public safety professionals in Maryland, and we're here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any questions? Yeah. Madam Secretary, obviously, my concern is the $2 million that is actually my piece of legislation. And we have been trying to find ways to make sure that those funds were expended over the years since its inception. I think I am seeing, I'm optimistic in the organizational structure you put in place. That's huge because there were some challenges when we initiated this. What were we doing with these funds? What were they used for? Placement, where folks were. And so this looks to be certainly more clearly defined than it has been. However, I appreciate the position that you're in, being a secretary appointed by the governor, that, obviously concurring with the budget. A budget which is calling for those $2 million going away, and pretty much essentially going away from down to 1.3, as we're going to need those funds going forward. So I'm going to offer this to you. I want to work very closely with you because I am not inclined to just rubber stamp the budget regarding those dollars. I know what they're for. I understand how vital that is to the professionalism of our public safety officials across the state. There's a reason we did that. There's a reason we broke out from the Police and Correctional Training Commissions to establish a standards commission for accountability. And with the Justice Reinvestment Act, which we started back in 2016, on up to and through, and we'll be revisiting everything as we should. As we assess to police reform, we have to have the resources moving forward. We have to. And so I need for you all, with those bright minds you have over there, and that tremendous skill set of employees that our state has in public safety, I need for you guys to come up with, continue to come up with concrete ways to spend and project why you need those dollars. So I need you guys to fight respectfully because you, obviously, you're a part of the administration, and we're going to fight on this end. We need to see, I think this is probably the most formalized breakout that we've ever seen of the dollars over the years. And we are in a interesting fiscal window. And beginning last year, we began to see unencumbered funds end up back in the general fund for the governor. And for those that were important, like pediatric cancer research, we had to fight to get those back into the budget, back in those special funds that need to be. So I'm asking you to do the same.
And we thank you for understanding the importance of those funds.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And there's a reason, we can't possibly hold people accountable if we don't give them the resources. Okay. And work together to make sure that the expectation is clearly defined. And so, again, whatever you need to do on the side with the governor's office and the folks you report to, this is important. You know, public safety officials touch our community every day, all day. And we need to make sure that we have the best, the brightest, the service-focused individuals that are there, understanding that they have the support of you and the administration, because, you know, we've all been around for a while. We've seen the other side of what we offer, and our public deserves better. And that is, you know, that's glaring in this report. And we've been trying to avoid this. I've been fortunate to be on the Budget Committee 10 of my 11 years here. And we've been trying to avoid from day one getting to the point where a governor looks at those dollars and say, hey, they're not being used. And so we're hoping your commitment will help us because we're going to help you on this end.
Thank you.
All right. So, anything? Don't have anything? Anything from anybody else? Glad to see you. Glad to see some familiar faces here now. And yeah, look, I mean, it's important. That's the most important piece here.
No, we
Because
really appreciate your
if you
support
don't
on
have this here, not only will projects, you know, be delayed or lost. You know, just the basic. I mean, you know, we're proud that we established a standards commission in this state. Corrections has had a standards commission. It's a long time coming. We can't have it falter. We cannot have it falter. So that's a commitment, and we commit ourselves as your partner. So let's stay in touch on that.
We will.
Let's figure this out. I need y'all to do your homework on that side. Know that we're gonna do it on our side. So we get what we need. You guys have anything else for us today? Thank you for hanging with us today.
Absolutely.
It's been a long one, and I guess we'll probably see you next week or something. I don't know.
Yeah, back
You guys
again.
are around. If I could speak to your MPTSC staff after session, I need some contact. I need just set up a date for a constituent of one of our committee members who doesn't sit on this committee about a concern. All right? Great weekend. That concludes the hearing.